Hi, my name's Anna, 32 years old, currently residing in Illinois with my own happy family of me, my husband, and 3 little angels. The story I'm about to tell happened 14 years ago. It was in the summer where I spent my school break working part-time in a nearby McDonald's restaurant. I often work night shifts. To make sure I'm safe from home to work, I often use my father's car. And that's when the scary things happened to me. I remember that was a super busy day, when even with a full complement, our chef was barely enough to cover all the guests. We closed down the shop 30 minutes later than our shift. I was totally toasted after such an exhausting day. Due to being the closest to the shop, I was the last one leaving. As soon as I turned off the lights, I could hear a faint cry somewhere. It was 2 a.m., so everywhere around me was utterly quiet. I stood still, trying to lift my head to listen. It was clearly someone's crying, but there wasn't anything unusual around me. There was some rushed footsteps as well as if someone panting right behind my back. So I reopened the front door and peeked inside. However, there wasn't anything unusual. But I swear to God, the gasping was very, very close by. After a while of staring into nothing, suddenly I heard, "Please help me." The sound of a young woman rang out from there, yet it sounded twisted, as if went through 100 of sound filters. "Who are you? Come on out." After a deep breath, I bellowed with all my courage, "Santa, please, help me." Oh my God, that girl knew me. The fact that she knew me, or of someone I knew, twisted my guts. "Whoever that is, come on out now," I demanded one more time with all the courage I had mustered. Yet there was no response. Only a quiet wailing answered me. That's it. I had enough of their game, I thought to myself, losing patience. Plus my eyelids and soaring feet were slowly torturing me. So I closed the shop quickly and made my way to the parking lot. I made sure to have locked all doors from inside before turning the key. As soon as the car grumbled and moved out to the aisle, there was a white shadow jumped straight on my path, prompting me to hit the brake with all my might. "Holy shit!" I yelled aloud as my entire body tilted toward the steering wheel. Thankfully, I was conscious enough to not step on the accelerator. Yet even with all that, my heart was beating like it's gonna fall out of my chest. When I lifted my eyes up, I could see a young woman, totally naked, trying to stop my car from leaving. She's knocking on the door frantically, tears running from her frightened eyes. Took me a while to realize she was Nicole, my classmate. I immediately opened the door for her and showed her the blanket that often reserved for my sleep. Her body was dead cold, even though it's an Illinois summer night. Nicole begged me to call the police. Her mother and siblings needed urgent rescue. It took me 3 times to successfully dial 911. My hands were shaking with all the adrenaline and fluctuating emotions. Nicole wasn't looking so hot at all. After telling her home address, she blacked out completely. Her body was full of bruises. Something very, very horrible must have happened to her. 10 minutes later, the police arrived with an ambulance and paramedics. It was around 3:30 a.m. The paramedics brought Nicole to the hospital, while a police officer escorted me home. I was now safe, but I couldn't sleep. Nicole in her distressed state kept bugging me. The next day I saw on the morning news that a woman was shot 3 times and in critical state. With a gunshot wound to the head, it was a miracle that she was alive by the time the police got there. In the household, there were 3 other children of 12, 8, and 6 years old, bunkering up in their room. The 3 children were in a state of shock, but fortunately intact. The perpetrator was the husband and the father of the household. And the crime scene was Nicole's house. The revelation on the news stunned me. My parents suggested me to visit Nicole in the hospital. When I got there, she was in a state of shock and wrapped in a blanket. Nicole didn't react to any questions I asked her. It drove me to tears, more when I now knew what she had been through. Nicole was a beautiful-looking, active, and very friendly young woman.
Nicole's family has 4 sisters.
As far as I heard, they were of steps and half-siblings. Nicole was stepsister to the 12 and 8-year-old girls. The youngest one of 6 years old was the half-sibling of both. After recovery, Nicole told the police what happened that day. She heard a series of gunshots at around 1 a.m. After calming down, she moved to her younger siblings' room to check on them. But before getting there, a tall figure had entered the room. That was her stepfather, who barged in and tried to rape her. She managed to put up a fierce resistance, but to little avail. After a series of beatings and realizing she would soon run out of breath, she told the man to go to the bathroom to get prepped, and then sneaking out from there, naked. The rest of it was history. Not long after recovery, the little family was further torn apart from the death of their mutual mother. The monster that was the father was sentenced to life, while the siblings were designated to their respective relatives. Nicole and I, after the incident, we were getting very close. She was a very successful woman who was the bridesmaid on my wedding. Though far apart, her siblings remained very close, even though they weren't of the same bloodline. The pain might drive us apart or pull us closer together. It was all about how we handled our pain.
There are some sounds you never forget once you hear them. For me, the humming of the Cyberchase theme song outside my window in the middle of the night is one of them. 15 years have passed, but every time I hear that tune, I still shiver as I remember that night. It was the summer I turned 8. My parents were busy with their work schedules, so they decided to send me to my grandparents' house in Burnett, Texas. I was going to stay there for 3 weeks. My grandparents lived in a small wooden house surrounded by a forest. Living with them was their helper, Aunt May, who assisted with chores around the house. The first few nights at my grandparents' house, I couldn't sleep. Everything was unfamiliar, from the smell of wood to the sound of cicadas buzzing outside. A few nights later, a new sound joined the others, a faint rattling outside my window. I pulled my blanket up, leaving only my eyes exposed, telling myself it was just the wind blowing against the window. After a while, it disappeared, and I drifted off to sleep. I still thought it was a normal sound around here, so I didn't mention it to my grandparents. The next morning, my grandpa took me and our dog for a walk. We walked along the trail that led into the woods behind the house. Our dog suddenly stopped, her fur bristling on her back, and started to growl towards a bush. "What is it, Cora?" Grandpa asked. I looked in the same direction and saw a figure standing still behind a large pine tree. I blinked a few times, thinking I was imagining things, but the figure remained there, just standing still and watching. "Grandpa, there's someone over there." But when we looked again, the figure had vanished. The dog continued to growl. "Could be a lost hunter," Grandpa said, and that made sense to me. That night, after watching Cyberchase, I went to my room early. After talking to my parents on the phone, I got into bed to play my game console. In the middle of the night, I was woken up by a strange sound. Someone was humming the Cyberchase theme song outside my window. I pulled the covers over my head, scared, and just lay still. When the song ended, I slowly pulled the blanket down. "Grandpa," I called out to him. "Hey, it's me. Come out here, grandson. I want to show you something cool." Maybe he couldn't sleep and wanted to show me the stars or some wild rabbits coming out to feed at night, things he often told me about. I climbed out of bed, opened the window, and looked outside. A figure stood in the dark, reaching out a hand. "Let's go, kid." I took that hand and followed. We walked a few steps on the dirt road, heading toward the forest. I felt a bit strange because Grandpa wasn't saying anything, nor did he turn to look at me as usual. The moonlight grew brighter, and I looked down at the hand holding mine. This wasn't Grandpa's hand. His hand was more wrinkled. I also smelled a strong scent of tobacco, even though my grandpa didn't smoke. I saw something black sticking out from the back of his waistband. It looked like a gun. I slowed down, terrified. Immediately, I felt a tight grip and was pulled forward. Just then, Grandpa's familiar voice rang out from the direction of the house. "Ethan! Ethan, where are you?" I immediately stopped dead. The man flinched, turning his head towards the house. In that moment of distraction, I quickly yanked my hand free and ran back towards the house. "Grandpa! Grandpa!" I screamed as I ran. Grandpa was standing on the porch, all the outdoor lights shining brightly. I rushed to him and hugged him tight. "Where have you been?" "What's wrong?" There was a man. I thought it was you, but it wasn't," I said. Grandpa held me close, then looked out towards the woods. Everything was just darkness now. Grandma and Aunt May also woke up because of the noise. Grandpa called the police immediately. They arrived and started searching the surrounding area. It didn't take long for them to find a man hiding in a drainage ditch over 300 feet from our house. The police also found a gun tucked into his pants. The man's name was Rick. He was Aunt May's ex-boyfriend. They had broken up a few weeks before I came to stay with my grandparents. Rick had followed Aunt May here and planned to kidnap me to force her to get back together with him. I didn't mean to hurt the boy. I just wanted May to understand that she needed me, Rick told the police. But the guns he had prepared told a different story. My parents drove all night to come pick me up. Although Aunt May had done nothing wrong, my grandparents felt they had to let her go. From then on, my parents rearranged their work schedules to spend more time with me. I still visit my grandparents every summer and during long breaks. I'm grateful that Grandpa woke up to use the bathroom that night and found me not in my room. If it hadn't been for his call, I can't imagine what would have happened in the woods that night with a man carrying a gun, determined to get what he wanted. That chill I felt running down my spine when I heard the news on the local radio is a feeling I'll never forget. 18 years have passed since that summer, but every time I think about it, I still shiver, remembering how close we came to disaster. I was almost 11, and my older sister, Laura, was 14. We grew up in Springfield, Illinois. The White Oaks Mall was the only place we cared about. On weekends, our parents would give us some spending money and let us take the bus downtown to see a movie or just wander around GameStop. As a huge video game fan, my goal was always to save up every penny to buy discounted games. On the bus ride home, I'd get lost in my own world, reading the instruction manuals and telling Laura fun facts from my Game Informer magazines. She'd just smile and nod until we got home. Then she could escape, so I could play video games in my room all weekend. A few months before that fateful trip, our grandma had moved from her old house in Atlanta, Georgia, into a new one closer to us. The neighborhoods were separated by Illinois Route 29. The bus stop was near a bridge that crossed the Sangamon River. We would usually get off the bus there, walk across the bridge, and follow the road lined with thick oak trees all the way home. My grandma's house was the closest one to the bus stop. At the time, our family was in a big conflict, and my parents weren't talking to my grandma. We hadn't been able to visit her in a long time, and my dad had almost forbidden us to go. That day, as Laura and I got off the bus, my mind was buzzing with the 3 PlayStation 2 games I'd just bought. I had a faint feeling that she seemed stressed, but I just figured she was in a hurry to get home to chat with her friends on AOL Instant Messenger. Suddenly, instead of taking the familiar route home, Laura turned us left toward my grandma's house. I was shocked, and being an impatient kid, I started asking over and over why we were going that way, since I was so anxious to get home and play my games. Laura made me even angrier by giving vague answers like, "It's a nice day for a walk," or "I just want to visit Grandma." Thinking about it now gives me chills, but back then, I just told her that Dad had forbidden it and that I was going to go home by myself. Of course, being the responsible older sister, Laura wouldn't let me go alone. She said our parents would be mad if I went home by myself and that it was her job to watch me. As we continued toward Grandma's house, I started to feel uneasy for the first time. I noticed Laura kept looking back and urging me to walk faster. I thought this was really strange. Laura also kept saying loudly, "Everyone's waiting for us at Grandma's," even though no one was. My steps began to feel heavier as I noticed how strange my sister's voice sounded. Laura never spoke that loudly, and the way she kept turning her head to look back made me feel like someone was following us. My heart started beating faster, but I still had no idea what was going on. We finally made it. Grandma was so surprised to see us show up at her door. We went inside and ate the chocolate chip cookies she'd just made. I had a great time playing with Buddy and forgot all about my games. Laura sat and talked with Grandma while we waited for our parents to pick us up. About a month later, I had almost forgotten about that weird day when shocking news spread through Springfield. It was the first and only child abduction our city had ever experienced. Everyone was talking about it, and I remember my parents and other parents joining search parties, scouring the woods in Lincoln Park. Tragically, 12-year-old Jeremy was found dead in the woods just 3 days after his family reported him missing. The whole city was in shock. The main suspect in the case, a man named Harold Green, killed himself with a gun in his garage before police could question him. Jeremy had apparently been kidnapped while walking across a bridge on his way to school. This bridge was about 4 bus stops toward downtown from the stop where we usually got off. I was an innocent kid and didn't connect the events until many years later, when Laura confessed the truth to me. She decided to take the long way to Grandma's house after she got a bad feeling about a strange man who was sitting behind us on the bus. He had followed us off the bus and silently trailed us until we walked into my grandma's house. Laura clearly remembers that he stood there, watching the house for a moment before turning around and walking away in the opposite direction. Laura said that as soon as we got on the bus at the mall, she had noticed the man's eyes. He was a big guy wearing a baseball cap and kept looking at us. At first, Laura thought it might just be a coincidence, but when he got off at the same stop and walked in the same direction, her gut instinct kicked in. I am certain that Laura's sharp instincts and quick thinking are the reasons I'm alive to tell this story. It was also a stroke of luck that Grandma had moved into the house so close to the bus stop. Every time I drive over that bridge on the Sangamon River, I still think about Jeremy and wonder if his life would have been different if he had an older sister like Laura with him on that fateful day.
My name's Mike. I'm a third-year student of Eastern Washington University. My best friend's Jim. We knew one another from the same college class. In the summer of the first year in the university, we planned a trip to the unknown, the places which not many people even knew existed. After a brief survey, we came toward a small village just 2 hours away from our university in Trout Creek, Washington. Surrounding the village was the vast wilderness, stretching its greenery from end to end. The entire population was just about a few hundred. We were excited about the trip, so we dived straight in after 3 days of paperwork. We started at 3 p.m. and arrived to our destination at around 5 p.m. The sunset here was breathtaking, prompting us to breathe in all of that fresh air. The road leading to the village was just a small trail, so we decided to park our ride at the entrance and walked in. We walked in slowly, looking around the place with curious city boy's eyes. After quite a while, we still hadn't spotted any houses. I myself was pretty exhausted, while my companion Jim was still full of energy. I suddenly tripped on a stone and fell. It was quite a huge fall from grace for me, one that Jim made great effort to make fun of. Yes, he did pull me up, but the laughter kinda killed it. Feeling annoyed, I picked up that rock to take a closer look at the perpetrator for my fall. It was a rather rounded, rugged piece of rock, the main reason for my loss of footing. But the more I looked at it, the less of a rock it felt like. Jim, seeing me struggle to pick up the rock, jested. "Don't tell me you started having a personal vendetta with this one, Mikey." Jim then plucked out the thick layer of dirt covering the rock, exposing a jaw full of teeth that was clearly of human origin. All the hair on my neck stood straight up. The tense atmosphere quickly enveloped the surrounding, turning the place from a peaceful wilderness into a creepy wild land. Jim immediately tossed the rock away, then laughed to ward off the sunken mood, though it wasn't very effective at all. We shouldn't think much of it, dude. Let's continue on our way. We continued our journey toward the village, sunken in our own thoughts and saying nothing. As we arrived at the village, the local residents greeted us with warmth and hospitality. It was also dinner time, so we enjoyed the local delicacy. We were glued to the lamb soup, the best local dish. It's cooked in a large earthenware cauldron over firewood for many hours, large enough to require 3 to 4 grown men to carry the pot around. Spices were also made from local ingredients, a true homebrew delicacy indeed. I noticed that there were not a lot of children in the village. Most people here were adults and only a few elderly people. Their hospitality and friendliness warmed us up. After a hefty dinner, we were gathering around the bonfire, sitting, dancing, and enjoying beside the flame. We were arranged to have our lodging at the village chief's residence. Our cell phone reception here was pretty poor, so we're not able to use our phones much. After some time talking, we fell asleep. Suddenly, in the middle of the night at around 3 a.m., I was awakened by the sound of children's laughter. They were super loud and seemed like there were a lot of them kids around the outside. Why the heck were them kids playing at this very late hour? I glanced down on my phone, annoyed by this. And where were all the adults letting this happen? I tried to bear with it and waited by slowly for the adults to take the kids home. But after a very long time without any stopping of the commotion, I had enough. So I decided to go outside and tell them kids to leave. But strangely, when I opened up the door outside, there was absolutely no one around. And even though the laughter's still echoing all over the place, I was standing there, dumbfounded by the discovery, staring motionless to the darkness, when Jim's voice jolted me back to reality. "Dude, what are you doing here?" But before I had the chance to tell him, another lower, hoarser voice echoed from behind us. "There's regulation that nobody here opens the front door and leaves the house before 6 a.m. Please close the door and return to your bed, you two." The stern look and tough voice of the village chief were vastly different than the time he greeted us. Jim and I, without any word, quickly returned to our room. Jim immediately fell asleep, while I was not able to sleep the entire night. In my head, the children's laughter and the cold demeanor of the village chief discomforted me. The next morning, the warmth and peace returned to the village. Jim and I followed the locals to the field, watching them grow their crops. There were neat stacks of green vegetables that greatly interested us. Meanwhile, I was planning to ask the village chief personally about what happened last night. The local said that agriculture was the stable food source that maintained the village for many, many years now. One day, however, there was a locust storm that devastated the crops and homes after only one day, right at the moment before everything was ripened enough for harvest. It was a really tough time. The survivors had to gather everything even remotely edible from leaves, barks, and roots. Hunger made them lose control and famine finished the rest. A few children couldn't make it through due to severe malnutrition. So in order to stay alive, the villagers decided to slaughter the last 3 lambs to make it through the famine. That was the origin story of the local delicacy we enjoyed yesterday. At the end of a long, laborious morning, the villagers returned to the community dining hall to have lunch and some well-earned rest. Of course, the lamb soup was among the food served there. I saw that everyone in here seemed to love this signature dish with all their hearts and minds, to the point of slurping until the very last drops. I asked the village chief why there's not any shepherd around here despite the lamb soup. He smiled and said that this soup was very special. It would never run out. Many years had passed since the time they slaughtered their last lambs. The same flavor was still there. I had stopped eating by then, staring down on my bowl. Emotions went all over the place for me. I threw a glance towards Jim. He'd finished his bowl in one big gulp. I quickly elbowed him it's time to move on, before promptly packing our things and literally dragging Jim out of there as soon as possible. He was super surprised by my quick action and threw question after question at me. Waiting till we were in the clear and our reception returned, I called the police. I explained to Jim that there wasn't any lamb soup at all. I had glanced down onto the pot, seeing only one broken down skull of a lamb. The rest of them were human skulls, children's skulls to be exact. The rock we stumbled across earlier was of that exact size, and that explained the severe lack of children within the village's vicinity.
My name is Gina. I'm 18 years old. I'm the only daughter and a treasure of my parents. My family's residing in the busy city of San Antonio, Texas. Even though I was born and raised here in San Antonio, my heart truly belongs to my grandparents' home in Modesto, California, and it had always been ever since I came there to visit them. I love the fresh air of that place, so at every long school break, I always asked my parents for a chance to visit my gramps. The elders were delighted every time I came to their door. They typically took me around the almond garden, where I could really enjoy the peaceful atmosphere that the big cities could never give me. Old-fashioned as they were, my gramps didn't watch TV, but they listened to the radio instead. I was a fan of my grandma's little radio. Also, my gramps had a loyal shepherd named Max, who's their best friend. Max was a really smart dog for its type. Every afternoon I often grabbed my grandma's radio and jogged along the backyard hills with Max. I would then listen to music, have a snacking picnic with Max until the gramps called out for dinner. Those happy times I wished would last forever. But everything changed 3 years ago. My family had just returned after a long flight from our vacation with our grandparents in Modesto to San Antonio. 3 days later, my dad received a phone call saying that my grandma had passed away from an accident in the almond garden. That evening after school, I saw my dad and mom had prepared a huge luggage. Sadness lingered in their eyes. I didn't know what's up, and sensing my confusion, my dad told me what happened to Grandma. I didn't cry at all, and in hindsight, I wasn't sure what I was thinking back then, but I had almost no emotion at all. I dragged my suitcase out and literally just went out of the house. I just want to get to Modesto as quickly as possible to confirm everything. My grandma was just fine. She would be thrilled to see us coming back. On our way back to Modesto, I felt really uneasy for the entire trip. I didn't answer any questions from my parents, but just stared at the windows. My thought was all about my grandma. We arrived and present at our grandparents' house the next day. As soon as the ride stopped, I rushed into the familiar house. I yelled aloud, but the familiar sight of my grandma, granddad, and Max were no more. The house was unusually quiet and gloomy. Max barked very loud, and when I came closer, I noticed that he's chained. Never before did my grandparents chain him, and thinking he's in a lot of stress, I released him away. He immediately came rushing inside. My parents also rushed in. The once beautiful and tidy house was now so empty without my grandma. Everything was messy. Even my grandma's favorite vase was broken as well. My grandpa sat motionless in the bed, right next to my grandma, and pale, lying motionless, bandage all over her forehead. No longer lingered on the thin thread. I was now completely collapsed. All I could do at that was cry. My parents also shared in my grief. I didn't remember for how long I had been kneeling down like that, but I did remember that Max barking snapped me out of my trance. Max had never done this before. He stared at my grandpa as if he's an enemy. My grandpa angrily looked at Max. He kept mumbling something, and without any words, he picked up his pistol in the locker and shot his dog in the head. Everything happened so fast that Max could only let out a weak whimper before completely ceasing any motions. Me and my parents were all stunned looking at that carnage. What the hell was going on here? What happened to my grandpa? I seemed to have lost every bit of sanity in me, and therefore I couldn't shed any tears anymore. My mom said it's due to the extreme grief that my grandpa had acted irrationally like so. My parents suggested a local funeral in the local church. It was also Grandma's favorite destination when she was alive. However, Grandpa insisted not. He only allowed his wife to rest in the place two of them had resided for 30 years. For 2 days, I remained close next to Grandma's coffin and ate and slept very little. My dad had also picked up a good place to rest Max, next to her. I did not see my grandpa wept or showed any kind of grief. He chose silence, just staring into Grandma's picture. It would be a closed casket funeral, he demanded. Every visitor could only view her coffin from afar, he requested. Even for my parents, my grandpa demanded for them to stay away. We did not dare argue with those irrational demands. After all, he was the one that was supposedly in the deepest grief. In the evening when I was next to my grandma's and Max's coffin, I opened up her favorite radio. Suddenly, the radio digital display showed up. "Hello, Gina?" When I was dumbfounded with the device, suddenly her singing voice rang over. This was her favorite song, which she used as my lullaby when I was a kid. She must have recorded this song to the radio, I thought. Hearing her voice again, the surge of emotion came back, and I couldn't hold off my tears. When the song was halfway through, a strong hand grabbed on the radio and snatched it from me. It was Grandpa, who mercilessly smashed the radio on the ground and broke it in pieces. I couldn't hold back my emotions anymore, and that was the first time I snapped at my grandpa, yelling to his face. My parents immediately jumped in to intervene, and my mom dragged me to the bedroom. She told me to wash myself up. It would calm me down. The family had enough problems already. I groggily dragged myself to the bathroom, and when I looked in the mirror, I could see my sanity hanging on by a thread. My grandma suddenly appeared in the mirror, where she smiled at me and whispered something. I believed from her mouthing that she was calling for my name. Suddenly on her forehead there was a hole, and from that hole, blood kept oozing out. She kept smiling, even though the blood had covered her entire face and mouth. When I turned my back around, she was gone. But I did spot something on the ground that looked like a spent cartridge case. A cartridge case, and the hole in my grandma's head. Things seemed to link in with each other. It prompted me to spring to action. I dropped the casing in my chest pocket and made my way down to Grandma's coffin. I had to see it. So I pushed open the casket and tried to look at my grandma's obscured bandaged head, when suddenly a strong hand grabbed my arm tight to the point of it being very painful. I had to bite my lips to not yell aloud. It was my grandpa. He was very close there, staring at me with bloodshot eyes and gritting teeth. I feel like he's someone else completely. The grandpa I knew and loved was no longer there. I swiftly snatched my hands away and turned back to my room. I remember to carefully hide away the cartridge case and my grandma's radio. After the funeral, my family must return quickly because we have many things to do back in San Antonio. On the day we went back, I didn't see my grandpa as my grandpa anymore. His changes scared me. 3 weeks later, I received the radio back from the repair. I nervously turned it on when waiting for my grandma's warm voice. It bursted into tears. I really missed her. "What are you doing? Stop it! Are you out of your goddamn mind? Help! Somebody help!" That was all I heard by the end of the recording. For 3 years, I hid the truth from my parents. I tucked within me the haunting last moment that completely changed my loving grandpa. Now he's much weaker, and he's losing the fight against stomach cancer. Should I tell everyone the things I know and dig more into my grandma's death? I am Martha, 32 years old, and a single mother. My 6-year-old daughter Sophie and I live in San Jose, one of the most expensive cities in the US. Our life is not a cozy life. You could say it's quite difficult. My husband passed away when Sophie was 4 years old due to a car accident. Sophie has a disease related to her eyes and needs surgery soon. Otherwise, it could affect her ability to see in the future. Although the government provided medical and educational support for us, the high cost of living in San Jose, combined with my unstable job situation, together, they forced me to work many long hours doing various jobs just to make ends meet. I have considered moving to another city to live, but there are many constraints that prevent us from doing so. One day when I picked Sophie up from school, I received bad news. My father had passed away suddenly that afternoon, with the initial cause determined to be a heart attack. I don't have many relatives. The only one I keep in touch with is my father, who was 67 years old and lived nearly 400 miles away from me. I arranged my work and took Sophie to her grandfather's house in Sacramento, California. After taking care of my father's funeral, I was scheduled to meet with his assistant to discuss some matters. The man name's Benny. He had worked for my father for nearly 20 years. Benny took me to my father's art gallery. My father was a painter. Benny introduced me to a painting of a stunning woman with a cold gaze looking straight ahead. She was bound with a golden chain. I wasn't sure why, but I felt a cold chill running down my spine looking at that painting. Benny said that this painting was demanded by a wealthy businessman at a very high price. And now, since he'd passed away, I am the legal owner of this painting and countless other paintings my father left behind, as dictated by inheritance law. To be fair, I really didn't care much about my father's paintings, and I had always felt that way since I was little. After discussing and fixing a reasonable price with Benny, I decided to sell the painting. That would be a good sum to taking care for Sophie. However, the painting had a few minor defects due to not being properly maintained. The paint on the woman's eyes was peeling and needed to be repaired before it could be sold. Benny said he would hire a talented artist to quickly work on the painting. Sophie and I would stay here for a while until the sale was completed, also for her summer break. When I entered my old childhood room, a pleasant sense of nostalgia hit me all at once. The room had remained exactly the same for many years. The next morning, Benny brought a young painter named Logan. Logan analyzed a lot about the painting for me, but it's all yada yada to me at this point. I gave him a price and the time frame for him to finish the painting as soon as possible, and he agreed. As Logan began his work, I lingered back to see my father's final work. The woman's eyes in the painting were indeed beautiful, yet terrifying to look at. It felt as if she was staring right at me, no matter what angle I viewed her from. When I stared intently, suddenly those eyes moved. The woman in the picture just blinked at me. I jolted and called out to Logan in a panic. He turned to look at me, but when I looked back at the painting, it had returned to normal. Maybe it's just the trick of the eyes. When I returned to the house, I didn't see Sophie anywhere. I called out her name several times without anything back. I ran upstairs, and as soon as I entered the room, I saw Sophie sitting on the bed. I furiously asked her why she hadn't replied when she heard me calling. Sophie sat on the bed, trembling, her face pale, and she spoke in a muffled whisper. "There's someone under the bed." I stood frozen, staring at my daughter. Sophie looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears. I could no longer control my breathing. My mind thought this was just her childhood fear of being alone, but I didn't act decisively. I bent down lower toward the underside of the bed and slowly leaned forward to look over.
The closer I got, the more could I feel someone's breathing there. But there was nothing down there. "It's just a trick of the eyes, sweetheart. Don't be afraid," I reassured Sophie. But immediately her innocent brown eyes stared back at me widely. I jumped up and screamed aloud, picked Sophie up, and dashed toward the door. Feeling something was amiss with my daughter, I stopped and took a closer look. Ophie's eye sockets were deep red, blood streaming down her small face and over her white dress. The eyes that I just saw under the bed were of Sophie. I pushed Sophie away, sank to the floor, and screamed in fear. The door swung open. Logan rushed in with Sophie in his arms, looking at me panikedly. I looked at Sophie, and then back at the image on the floor. It had disappeared. Rushing over to Sophie, I hugged her tightly, then checked on her face carefully. Logan said that Sophie had been in the shed with him since I left, so it was all in my head, stressed up and tired. It was still in a mess after all this time, ever since my husband passed away. After I calmed down, Logan told me to go to the shed. He had something he wanted me to see. The woman's eyes in the painting had been repaired by Logan. However, near her face, some paint had chipped away, revealing one eye. That eye was so familiar, yet I couldn't recognize it. What was hidden behind the perfection of this painting? Logan said he was creeped out by the woman's gaze, feeling as though he was being watched. Although I had the same feeling as Logan, I didn't told him about it. Instead, I told him to fix the painting quickly by tomorrow, and I would happily pay him extra. I just wanted to leave this house as soon as possible and wouldn't mind pushing anything further. That night, I woke up to find Sophie not beside me. I hurriedly searched for her. I checked the bathroom, living room, and kitchen, but couldn't find Sophie anywhere. Remembering what happened this morning, I ran down to the storage to look for Sophie. As I opened the door and stepped in, I avoided the creepy gaze from the painting and called my daughter's name. "Mom!" Sophie's voice called out from deep within the shed. I had never been inside this shed before. All I knew was that it housed hundreds of my father's paintings, and I had always tried my best to not been too curious about them. Through the dim light of my phone's flashlight, I found Sophie. She was trembling and clung tightly upon coming close to me. Just as we turned to leave, I shone the light ahead. That woman's face without eyes suddenly appeared. I screamed and held Sophie tightly. A few seconds later, nothing else happened. I took a deep breath and continued to shine the flashlight ahead. This time, it was a woman with bruised skin, smiling, but smeared all over with red blood. I was startled at that, yet I was sane enough to cover Sophie's eyes with my hand. And this time, I decided to come closer to look at that person again. It seemed she was the same as the woman without eyes in the picture I had seen earlier. I fumbled in the darkness searching for the switch to turn on the lights. As soon as the lights came on, I was shocked to see many horrific images surrounding me. There were dozens of paintings depicting that very same woman, each showing different brutal methods of torture. The two horrifying women I had seen earlier were among the paintings here. Each painting clearly recorded the date and time it was created, accompanied by my father's familiar signature. One painting marked the last date as June 13th, 2023, featuring the beautiful brown eyes. I easily recognized that the woman in the paintings here was the same as the one in the painting Logan was fixing. What's peculiar is that the woman in these paintings, despite being tortured, still had beautifully painted eyes that were meticulously done. Sophie's cries jolted me out of my trance of thoughts. I took her back to the room, and Sophie quickly fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up early. The first thing I did was return to the shed. I scraped the paint off the painting. Behind that strange eye, a man's face emerged. It was my father. I used both hands to scrape off all the paint, destroying the valuable painting. Another painting appeared. The woman, tightly bound with chains, was being strangled by my father pulling one end. Despite the blood oozing out from her broken body, her beautiful brown eyes were still glaring coldly from her disfigured face. I sought out Benny. I wanted to learn about my father's life when I wasn't around. It took a long time to convince him, and finally, Benny told me the whole truth. My father had a special passion with women's eyes. After many years of searching, he found Donna, the model for the woman in the paintings. Donna was both his lover and his model for all the paintings. Gradually, my father's personality changed. He became more and more possessive and controlling. He realized that the only thing he wanted was Donna's eyes. He once told Benny, "The most beautiful eyes of a woman are when they are in pain." The images in the shed were the continuous tortures he inflicted on Donna, and what remained in the end was the eyes, the thing he desired the most. The day Benny called me to inform me of my father's passing was the day he discovered my father in the shed, slumped aside the painting of Donna's eyes. My father died in a slumped position, with both hands holding his own eyes. I burned all of my father's paintings along with his painting tools. I took Sophie back to San Jose and put my father's house up for sale. I didn't want to keep anything related to my father or his terrifying works. Only true art deserves to exist.
I'm Isaac, 28, and I live in San Antonio, Texas. Born and raised in Texas, I and everyone around here were proud of Whataburger. It's like a state symbol. I was hooked on Whataburger. Everything on the menu drove me wild. Thanks to that obsession, I got a bit of a hefty look, 6'2" and 264 pounds. Even though I was kind of self-conscious about it, I just couldn't change how I eat. Eating Whataburger got me more hyped and happy than anything, so it was on my menu at least once a day. I moved at the end of last summer just to be close to a Whataburger. Since then, my once toned body turned into what it is now in just 4 months. I knew every location, recognized all the faces, and was tight with the owner and staff. One thing that was special about the Whataburger near my place was it was packed with other folks who were also pretty heavy. They came to eat every day too, and we'd become this special group the owner really liked. Out of everyone, I was tight with this guy my age named David, who also moved close just for this place, like I did. David showed me his pics from just 5 months ago. "Man, you were in perfect shape. I mean, used to be," I blurted out when I saw those pics, and we both cracked up. "Yeah, but after that first taste of the sandwiches and burgers here, I got totally hooked," David said with a hint of regret. Me, David, and a bunch of others in the group all felt the same way. But we were not trying to lose weight. Not being able to eat Whataburger would be pure torture. Just so you know, the store owner weighed close to 400 pounds. A few months later, my life totally changed when I met Glenda, my first real crush after a bunch of unrequited love. Glenda's cute and lives a healthy, balanced life. She also hooked me up with a diet and kicked off my weight loss journey for real. I had to cut back on how many days I was eating Whataburger each week, and it was honestly brutal. "Me or that burger?" Glenda shot me a look when she spotted the beef burger I had secretly bought on the table. "Come on, Glenda, just this one." "I'm running out of patience," she cut in, growling when I tried to plead. After picking it up, I had to toss the burger away, and it hurt like hell. David's messages and calls were piling up because I'd been MIA more often. I had to spill the beans to David. Not being able to eat at the Whataburger near my place really messed up my mood and personality. It was awful. I was always bummed out, restless, and felt stuck. There was a point when my heart was racing,
and I totally lost control of my actions. I yelled at Glenda and started smashing stuff around the house. I even threatened to off myself if she didn't get me Whataburger. "Isaac, are you crazy?" Glenda yelled, squeezing my hand. I got a headache and felt dizzy. Everything in front of me was spinning. The phone rang, and it was someone from my Whataburger addict crew. "Isaac, David just passed away." That hit me like a ton of bricks, but my heart started racing like crazy. Glenda and I rushed over to David's place, and the police were already there. David's body was right at the entrance. His face was all purple, and he was stiff with his mouth wide open and eyes staring. Inside David's house, police found a ton of trash, mostly food and Whataburger cans everywhere. In David's airway, the forensics team pulled out a bunch of food that wasn't chewed right, and a piece of a chicken bone, which caused him to choke and die. The autopsy showed that David had been exposed to some addictive stuff found in the food at Whataburger. The addictive stuff built up over a bunch of days, making David's appetite go wild and totally out of control. Right after David died, 5 more people from the group ended up in the hospital in really bad shape. Police went to the Whataburger to check things out and found the owner's decomposing body in the back room. To rake in a ton of cash from the store's huge monthly sales, he mixed in some addictive stuff with the ingredients. David, I, and a bunch of other folks with the same interests, eating habits, and big appearances are his success. We wasted our money making that bastard rich while also buying ourselves a disease that was wrecking our bodies every single day. I was in shock and totally crushed. The next few days were just hell. I was going through therapy, detox, and trying to lose weight all at once. But thanks to Glenda, my rock and support, I pulled it off. I had to go through a bunch more surgeries after losing weight, but when I looked in the mirror, I just broke down in tears like I'd been reborn. Today, Glenda and I went to visit David's grave to tell him about the wedding we were planning. My story begins in the summer when I was 14, in a quiet town. I am Logan, a mischievous and somewhat stubborn boy, like any other teenager. I moved to the town when I was 10 years old with my parents. The town where I lived was nothing special, just a quiet place, far from the busy and noisy city. I often played with a group of friends my age. We spent almost the entire summer exploring the hidden corners of the town, searching for daring challenges to satisfy the curiosity of youth. Near my house, there is an abandoned warehouse, old, gloomy, and quite spacious. That warehouse always drew the attention of me and my friends, but at the same time, it also scared us. My mom once said that the warehouse was used to store something extremely frightening, something she didn't want me to know about in detail. But Mom's warnings seemed to be nothing more than passing wind to a stubborn teenager. To us, that only made the warehouse even more intriguing. We often played around the warehouse, sometimes daring each other to see who would get closer or who dared to touch that rotting door. But it all stopped there. There was curiosity, but also no small amount of fear. None of us dared to actually step inside. The warehouse exuded a mysterious, eerie aura, as if warning anyone who came too close. One day, while we were gathered outside playing, I suddenly caught sight of a shadow moving inside the warehouse. I looked closely and realized it was a girl, about our age. She stood there, between the dim light and the darkness, her demeanor calm, as if the warehouse held no fear at all. We all stopped, wide-eyed, unable to believe what we were seeing. How did she get inside? And why did she dare? Her bravery amazed and impressed us, but at the same time, it sparked our curiosity more than ever. The whole group decided to get closer, trying to see more clearly inside through the dusty old window gap. Each of our steps was slow, as fear tightly gripped each of us. As we got closer, I smelled a foul stench coming from inside, so strong and unpleasant that I had to wrinkle my nose. My friends started to shudder, and a few of them immediately vomited, unable to hold it back. My heart was pounding, gripping tightly to my trembling legs that couldn't run. But just then, I heard a frantic, terrified scream. One of my friends had fainted right on the spot. We quickly took him home in a panic. When he woke up in the hospital, his face was still pale, his eyes filled with terror. He said that he had seen a hand reaching out from the gap in the door, a pale white hand. We didn't dare say anything more about what had happened. Fear still surrounded each of us. The locals, after hearing about it, immediately called the police. A few mornings later, the sound of police sirens echoed through our small town, with engine noises and flashing blue and red lights surrounding the area of the abandoned warehouse. The truth that the police revealed shocked us and was beyond belief. In the abandoned warehouse, the police found the remains of about 190 people in various stages of decomposition. Many of the bodies were uncovered or only partially covered. Some of the bodies were placed on ambulances, while others were just lying on the floor. Other bodies were stacked on top of each other, blocking the doors in some parts of the building. Maggots, flies, and other insects covered the floor and clung to the bodies. In many transparent plastic bags, the decaying fluid had filled them, causing the bags to burst and spill onto the floor. Many of the bodies, including those of children, were placed in buckets or cardboard boxes to catch the leaking, decaying fluids. The fluid had spread across the floor so much that it caused officers to slip several times while moving the bodies outside. So the terrifying thing my mother had always alluded to, which was stored in that warehouse, turned out to be human remains. But it wasn't something that had happened in the past. It was still carrying out its purpose, unnoticed by any of the locals living nearby. It was known that the warehouse used to belong to a couple who founded a funeral service company. Because they didn't pay rent, failed to pay taxes, and were sued for defaulting on payments to the cremation service, the couple was evicted by the landlord. They were charged with corpse abuse and faced a sentence of 15 years in prison. As for me and the other friends, we have undergone dozens of psychological treatments over the past 10 years. Every night I have to use sleeping pills and sedatives just to fall asleep. The story above is based on a real case that occurred in 2023. John and Carrie Halford, the owners of the funeral home Return to Nature, took money for services, but neglected 190 decomposing bodies in a warehouse for over 4 years, giving fake ashes to the families. In September 2023, residents around the town of Penrose, Colorado, began noticing a foul odor lingering in the air. At first, they thought it was the smell of a leaking septic tank or the scent of dead animals. Later, it was determined that the odor of decay was coming from the abandoned house. This used to be the warehouse of the funeral company Return to Nature, known for its advertisement of green burial services with no embalming chemicals or metal coffins. On October 5th, 2023, nearly a dozen police vehicles surrounded the abandoned warehouse. The FBI field officers in Colorado later stated that this was the most horrific task of their lives.
I am Violet, 30 years old. My fiancé is Gavon. We've been together since we were 12, after this crazy, scary thing that happened. It was summer, and the three of us as a family headed out to a farm in the suburbs to chill after getting an invite. My dad was thinking about putting some money into the farm project the young couple was running. At first, I just thought this trip would be cool, full of fun memories out in nature. But out of nowhere, it turned into the most chilling and unforgettable memory of my life. As soon as our car hit the dirt road to the farm, this huge stretch of green grasslands opened up in front of us. The barley fields were swaying in the golden sunlight, and you could see a few tractors scattered in the distance. A bunch of cows were just chilling, munching on grass, and the only sounds were the rustling wind and birds chirping. It all felt like something straight out of a country movie, so peaceful. The farm was at the end of the road, and the big white wooden house really stood out. My mom was all about praising it, and my dad was excited, talking about how great the project could be. I just stayed quiet, letting myself get lost in the scene. It was something I'd never seen before. Robbie and Grace, the farm owners, greeted us when we got there. They were tall, young, and had friendly smiles. They gave us a tour of the farm, showing us all the animals, the crop areas, and the equipment they'd bought. I noticed a boy standing behind the door of the house. He seemed pretty shy, always watching us, but didn't react when I waved. Grace introduced him as her son. His name's Marcus, and he's my age. Marcus didn't say anything, didn't even react when Grace called him. The first few days at the farm were awesome. I tried a bunch of new things, feeding chickens, picking veggies, milking cows, and playing with these smart sheepdogs. But Marcus always kept his distance, just standing off to the side watching me. I could tell he wasn't just shy, but there was this constant sadness about him too. Marcus didn't say a word, didn't even laugh or whisper. It made me wonder if he was hiding something or just shy. Marcus's total silence threw me off. Even when I tried talking to him, he just nodded or made gestures. Was that just how he was? Or was there something else going on? The way Robbie and Grace treated Marcus was pretty weird too. Even though they always said sweet, caring things, their eyes and gestures felt kinda cold. Marcus never looked at his parents when they talked to him. There were times when I saw Marcus trembling and looking scared when his parents called his name. I brought Marcus some wildflowers and snacks and invited him to join in the games. Then Marcus gave a little smile when I shared my stories with him. But Marcus still didn't talk. He only communicated with his eyes and simple gestures. There were times when I caught Marcus's eye, like he wanted to say something, but there was some invisible barrier stopping him. On the third day, which was also our last day at the farm, things started to make sense. After the farewell party Robbie and Grace threw for us, everyone was sitting around, chatting and having a good time. Marcus quietly pulled me away from the table. He took me to this old barn, full of hay and dusty farm tools. Marcus opened up a small box he had hidden under the hay. Inside was a photo of Marcus smiling really big next to a couple, probably around the same age as my parents and his. The two people looked a lot like Marcus, especially the man. Their faces were full of love and warmth. Marcus pointed at the photo, his hands shaking as he made a heart sign over the couple, then just started crying. Before I could ask anything, he pulled out another photo. In this photo, the couple was standing with Marcus's current parents. The date on the photo was just a little over a year ago. Marcus pointed at his current parents, then crossed his hands to make an X. Then he pointed to the first couple and made a heart again. Marcus's next move gave me the chills. He opened his mouth, and to my horror, his tongue was gone, leaving this dark, empty space. Marcus made a cutting motion with his hand, like scissors. His face twisted in pain, and tears were streaming down his cheeks. So Marcus couldn't talk because his tongue had been cut off. I was shocked when I realized what he was trying to say. The couple in the first photo were his real parents, and the couple he was with now, they weren't. So where are your real parents? I asked Marcus. He shook his head over and over, his shoulders trembling as he tried to hold back his tears. The awful truth hit me hard, and I almost choked. I realized that Marcus wasn't just mute. He was carrying a deep, painful tragedy inside him. I tried to stay calm, reassured Marcus, and told him to just stay away for now. I took a deep breath, ran over to my mom, holding my stomach, and told her I needed her help with it. I dragged my mom into the bathroom and told her everything. At first, she gave me this suspicious look, But seeing how panicked and upset I was, my mom quickly hugged me, told me to stay quiet, then pulled out her phone to call the police and text my dad to fill him in. After a while, once I had calmed down, my mom and I went back to the party. My mom happily kept chatting with the adults while I just kept eating, too freaked out to look at the two murderers sitting right in front of me. About 15 minutes later, the police burst in. The murderous couple knew they'd been caught and were beyond pissed. Robbie pulled out a gun and fired a few warning shots, cussing the whole time. My mom pulled me in tight to protect me. I clearly saw my dad running to hug me and my mom, and then a bullet flew right into his back. One of the police got hurt while trying to stop the two killers, but they were both eventually arrested. The cops took Marcus away. His face was still covered in tears, but I could see relief in his eyes. Robbie and Grace were just a couple of cold-blooded killers. They had tricked Marcus's real parents out of all their money by using the same scam, inviting them to visit and invest in the farm. Marcus's parents were killed just a few days after getting to the farm. As for Marcus, they saw him as a good way to create the perfect family image, so they made him mute and threatened him with harsh words. My dad was seriously hurt but luckily made it, though his health's been really affected since then. That summer wasn't just the end of a nightmare, but also the start of an unbreakable bond between me and Marcus. Now, we're gonna be together, getting ready to kick off a new chapter in life.
I am Jason, 25 years old. Last summer, I had a terrifying experience, and I will never return to that remote countryside again. Diego, my best friend, begged me to take care of his dog Odin at his countryside house for a few days. At first, I intended to refuse. The house was isolated, surrounded by dense trees, and the air was always chilly, especially frightening at night. But Diego kept insisting, saying there was no one else to ask, and in the end, I agreed. The first day passed fairly peacefully. Odin is a large but gentle and loyal shepherd dog. We played in the yard, where the afternoon sunlight filtered through the tree leaves. The atmosphere was peaceful, with only the sound of the wind blowing and the distant chirping of birds echoing. The scenery was beautiful, but I couldn't deny that it gave off a strange sense of isolation. By evening, I took Odin for a walk around the house, fed him, and made sure everything was fine. Diego's house was beautifully designed and well-equipped, but when the sun set, darkness covered everything, transforming the place into a completely different scene. I shut all the doors tightly and turned on the lights everywhere to feel less scared. When the clock showed nearly 8 o'clock, my stomach began to growl. I ordered food from the nearest restaurant, which was over 30 minutes away by car. The wait seemed endless. The sound of the delivery motorcycle echoed from afar, and I quickly went to the door to receive the order. But just at that moment, Odin began to growl. At first, I thought it was just reacting to the stranger, but then it became unusually agitated. Odin barked loudly, the bark echoing through the silent night, then suddenly charged straight out the door. I panicked, quickly locked the door, grabbed the flashlight, and ran after Odin. Its bark echoed somewhere in the darkness, leading me away from the house without me even realizing. I walked through the narrow paths, where dry branches cracked underfoot. The surroundings were only lit by the faint light of the flashlight, and the dense darkness seemed to want to swallow everything. The wind whistled through the trees, carrying a strange, musty smell. A chill ran down my spine, making me shiver. Odin's bark sounded again, but this time it seemed farther away, as if carried off by the wind. I shouted its name, but all that answered was the echo. My heart began to race, and anxiety grew with each passing minute as I realized I was lost. I continued to follow the sound, but everything around me seemed to be playing hide and seek with me. The sound of a broken branch cracked behind me, but when I turned around, there was nothing but darkness and rustling leaves. I tried to stay calm, telling myself that it was just my imagination, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger with each passing moment. Every step felt as if an invisible gaze was watching me, making me afraid to stop. Then I saw it. A tall, dark figure, standing motionless among the tree trunks. The figure must have been about 7 feet tall, its body thin and rigid. The flashlight beam revealed a faded baseball cap worn on its head. I stood frozen, my throat dry, and my legs felt like they were nailed to the ground. It took me a few seconds to realize that it was just a mannequin. It was made of straw, covered in old, tattered clothes. But why would there be a mannequin placed in the middle of the forest? Who made it? And for what purpose? Feeling extremely uneasy, I decided to return to the old path, even though I wasn't sure I was going in the right direction. My mind was spinning with chaotic thoughts, and my legs felt tired with every step. When I finally escaped the forest, Diego's house appeared dimly in the flickering light. I almost collapsed when I entered the house. The clock was now almost 2 a.m. Odin has not returned yet. I sat down on the chair, holding a glass of water with shaking hands, trying to calm myself down. But the feeling of anxiety and guilt still weighs heavily in my heart. I blame myself for letting Odin get away. That whole night, I couldn't sleep, just waiting in vain. The next morning, I continued to search everywhere for Odin, but there wasn't any trace. When Diego returned, I had to confess that Odin was missing. His eyes were full of anger, but underneath it was sadness that couldn't be hidden. Odin is not just an ordinary dog, but also a close friend for 10 years, a gift from Diego's late father. I don't know what happened to Odin in the forest that night. The feeling of guilt still haunts me, and the image of a tall, black shadow in the forest always appears in my dreams. I just hope that Odin has found a safe place, but I still fear that he has been caught up in something more terrible, and I will never forget that terrible night. I am Mary Vincent, 45 years old. The story I'm about to tell is not just a terrifying memory of a fateful day, but also a reminder that life is sometimes shaped by moments that seem like the last. 30 years ago, I was just a young girl with simple dreams, a love for dancing, and a desire for freedom. One summer morning, a normal day that turned into the longest nightmare of my life. I was standing by the side of the highway with another couple, our thumbs raised, hoping that some car would stop to give us a ride. I needed to get to Los Angeles to visit my grandfather. The long journey and the heat of the road left me exhausted. Every minute of waiting on this deserted road felt like I was trapped in helplessness. I watched each car speed past, and finally, a truck stopped. The window rolled down, and inside was a middle-aged man, his calm face, smiling friendly. At my request, along with the couples, the man said the truck could only carry one person. I was a bit confused because the truck was still quite spacious. Tired and anxious, I stepped into the truck, ignoring the couple's advice to wait for another ride, and the rumbling engine carried me away from the stifling heat. The wind blew through the window, and fatigue quickly lulled me to sleep. When I opened my eyes, the scenery outside had changed. The highway had disappeared, replaced by a narrow road surrounded by dark forests. Thick foliage blocked most of the light, plunging everything into a dim, cold glow. I looked at the man, asking about the route we were taking, but he remained focused on driving, his lifeless eyes and cold expression. The air inside the truck grew heavy, as though the very oxygen had been sucked out. Fear started to rise. I knew I was in a place I should not be. Before I could fully understand the situation, he stopped the truck, saying he needed to use the bathroom. The air outside was colder than I expected. I stood by the side of the road, trying to breathe deeply to calm myself, but just then, everything happened so quickly that I had no time to react. He attacked me from behind, his rough hand gripping my wrist. I struggled, but his strength far surpassed mine. The cold rope quickly bound my hands, imprisoning me in the grip of a demon. The feelings of humiliation and disgust overwhelmed me as he tormented me right there in the truck. I couldn't cry, couldn't scream, only pain and fear consumed my entire body. He threatened me, his voice deep and raspy, hissing through his teeth, causing all hope of survival within me to vanish. As the sun began to set, he drove me to a desolate, rocky area. The atmosphere there felt like it belonged to another world. The wind howled through the sharp rocks, carrying the smell of dry earth. He dragged me out of the car and forced me to drink something. I couldn't resist, only feeling the bitter taste and the numbing sensation slowly taking over my body. Everything around me faded, leaving only fragmented images, the faint light from the setting sun, the cold wind cutting through my torn skin. When I woke up, the pain brought me back to reality. In front of me was the image of the man holding a gleaming axe. Absolute fear froze me. He said nothing, only coldly lowered the axe. Pain tore through my arm. I screamed in pain and despair. But that was not the end of the devil's cruelty. He threw me down the cliff, my body crashing violently against the cold stone. I could feel every joint crack, each wave of pain piercing through my entire body. I lay there, motionless, listening to my heartbeat slow down. But I didn't give up. A fire inside me still burned, reminding me that I had to live. I struggled to crawl up the cliff, using the remaining flesh of my arm to stop the bleeding. Cold, pain, and exhaustion surrounded me, but my fierce will to survive wouldn't allow me to quit. Every inch on that rocky wall was a battle, and each step down the dark path was a victory. Blood and mud covered my body, but I just knew I had to keep going. When the headlights of a car flashed in the dark, I raised my severed arm to signal for help. The car stopped, and I saw the horrified expressions of a couple. They took me to the hospital, and as the pain faded, I realized I had survived. In the days that followed, I lived with the haunting memories, the lifeless gaze of the man, the gleaming axe, and the feeling of free fall as I was thrown down the cliff. All of it still haunts me every moment. I recounted the entire ordeal to the police, using my own body as evidence to accuse the monster. He had to face the rightful punishment, to pay for his freedom. I survived to tell this story, learning to adjust to prosthetic arms and a new life. I will never forget the gaze of that man. I not only lost both of my arms, but I also lost my trust in humanity. But I have learned to live with the pain and the trauma, and I know that every day I am alive is a victory. I am proof that even in the darkest times, we can find the strength to survive. And I hope that my story will make someone think twice before getting into a stranger's car. I'm Ethan. I drive deliveries for a Pizza Hut outside Austin, Texas. This job's not my dream or anything, but it pays the rent and covers some bills, so I stick with it and do my best. It was one of those hot summer nights. Even though it was past 10, the air was still heavy, like being stuck in a giant glass box. I'd knocked out most of my deliveries and had just one pizza left for this quiet residential area. The neighborhood's got these big houses and even bigger bushes, so it's peaceful, but kind of lonely. I pulled up my beat-up delivery truck in front of this small house. The porch light threw a yellowish glow on the walkway leading to the door. Holding the hot pizza, I suddenly felt that annoying bladder pressure kicking in. I told myself to hold it, thinking I'd be home soon anyway, but I couldn't hold it. I realized I had to go right then and there. I started looking around, all anxious. The whole neighborhood was dead quiet, not a single person anywhere. For a second, I thought about knocking on the door and asking to use their bathroom, but I shut that idea down fast. No way I was knocking on a customer's door, especially someone who didn't know me. Just thinking about it made my face heat up with embarrassment. So, I went with the quickest, least noticeable option, find a big bush by the house and, well, handle business. I still felt guilty because it was definitely not the right thing to do, but my body wasn't giving me much of a choice. I made my way to the bush, moving fast and keeping an eye out to make sure no one was around. In my head, I kept telling myself it was no big deal and no one would even notice. But deep down, I couldn't shake off the shame. As I crouched down, I silently apologized to the house and whoever lived there, hoping they'd never find out. Just as I got started, I heard this soft sound, like footsteps, and froze. My heart was racing and my mind was spinning. Did someone see me? I held my breath, didn't dare move, and crouched even lower, pressing myself against the bushes to stay hidden. Through the leaves, the dim light from the street lamp lit up a figure. It was a guy in a dark coat, crouching in the bushes right next to me. My heart nearly stopped when I saw he was holding a shiny knife, a big roll of duct tape, and what looked like a bottle of medicine. I froze completely, feeling cold sweat drip down my back, even though it was still crazy hot outside. I wanted to turn and run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then he looked up, and our eyes met. His stare was cold, empty, and calculating. I held my breath, too scared to move an inch. All the guilt I'd been feeling about being rude vanished, replaced by straight-up fear of what this guy might do. For a second, I thought he was going to charge at me, but he didn't. He just stared at me, and that freaked me out even more, the silence, like he was deciding what to do with me. With whatever courage I had left, I turned and bolted, running as fast as I could. My hands were shaking like crazy as I fumbled to grab my phone and call the police. My voice was all over the place as I told them what happened, where I was, and what I saw. I stood next to my car, keeping my eyes glued to the bushes. My legs wouldn't stop shaking and my head was spinning with a million thoughts. Did I just stumble on some criminal? Or was he just some homeless guy with weird stuff? Waiting for the police felt like it took forever. I barely breathed, just watching him sit there, not moving a muscle. When the police finally showed up, they surrounded him and got him restrained real quick. They took all the stuff he had and started checking it out, so what I saw was real. But the craziest part was when they found a photo in his bag. One of the officers pulled it out, and his whole face changed. He didn't waste any time, just headed straight to the house I was about to deliver to and knocked on the door. The woman who answered was my customer, Haley. Haley let out a scream when she saw the guy getting arrested. She told the police he was Tyler, her ex-boyfriend who'd been stalking and harassing her for months. It was pretty obvious that him being there with a knife and duct tape wasn't just a coincidence. Standing there, I felt this low-key panic bubbling up, not just because of the whole awkward thing I'd been doing earlier, but because I'd somehow gotten mixed up in something so terrifying. At the same time, though, I felt a sense of relief that I'd called the police when I did. If I hadn't stopped by that bush, who knows what could have happened to Haley? I didn't even want to think about it. That night, I drove home with my head all over the place. Every time I thought about it, I felt guilty and thankful at the same time, despite an awkward start. When I was 7, my family moved to a new neighborhood. Right across the street was Melissa's house. She was in her 40s, a single mom with a 6-year-old daughter named Ella. Melissa was very nice and friendly, and she quickly became good friends with my mom. I got to know Ella too, and we became really close. She was always there for me, helping me settle in, and actually loved my new home. But then, one night, everything changed. That night, it was pretty hot, so I left my window open when I went to bed. I usually kept it that way because from my room, I could see Melissa's bedroom window. Every night, we'd wave goodnight to each other. A loud scream jolted me awake. I sat up, looked around, and thought the scream came from outside my window. I peeked out, all confused, but didn't see anything weird. Melissa's window was shut, and outside, it was just the empty street, flickering streetlights, and crickets chirping. I was so sleepy, I figured I must have imagined it, and went back to bed. The next morning, while my parents and I were having breakfast, someone knocked on the door. I thought it was Ella wanting to hang out. I ran to open it, but my smile quickly faded into confusion. There was a man I didn't know standing at the door. He greeted us and said he was an investigator. I just stood there, totally confused, not sure what was going on. When I happened to look past him, I saw Melissa's house covered in yellow tape. I knew that tape usually meant there was a crime or even a murder. Ella and I loved watching crime shows. Right away, the scream from last night hit me like a ton of bricks. No way, that couldn't be real. I had to be imagining things. I almost started crying and asked the investigator, was Ella okay? What happened to Melissa? Right then, my mom walked over and the investigator asked to talk to her. My parents and the investigator went into the kitchen and my mom comforted me, telling me to go to my room. I pretended to listen, but quietly snuck closer to the dining room to eavesdrop. I heard the investigator say Melissa was dead, and my mom immediately broke down in tears. The investigator said the killer got into the house through the back door. There was no sign of a broken door, so they figured Melissa probably forgot to lock it. She had been stabbed multiple times. And the worst part? The murder weapon was still stuck in her head when they found her. Weirdly, no money or jewelry was taken. There was no sign of a robbery. Ella was safe, sleeping in her room when it all happened. It was clear the killer was after Melissa, and the marks on her body made it obvious it was out of anger or revenge. I was in shock. Melissa was such a good person. How could anyone do something so horrible to her? She felt like family, and what happened broke everyone's hearts. After that, the investigator asked my parents about the guy who lived next door. That was Jim, our nice neighbor. The investigator wanted to know if my parents had seen him at home that night and how he acted around Melissa. My parents insisted that Jim was a good guy who would never do something like that. But the investigator said that from Melissa's CCTV footage, a man about 6 feet tall, wearing a black hat and a leather jacket, was seen going into the house. From the looks of it, Jim matched that description, so they temporarily considered him a suspect. I couldn't believe Jim had anything to do with Melissa's death, but what the investigator said next shook me to my core. It was really dark inside the house, but luckily, the guy was standing near a nightlight, and they saw a pink and yellow beaded bracelet on his wrist. Hearing that, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I ran into the kitchen and asked the investigator to show me a photo of the bracelet. Even though the photo was pretty blurry, I recognized it right away. It was the bracelet I had made and given to Jim to thank him for being so kind to my family. I just couldn't believe it. How could someone so kind do something as horrible as murder? He was someone we trusted, someone who even looked after me when my parents weren't home. I told the investigator about the bracelet, and that pretty much confirmed his suspicions. He asked a few more questions, then left to update his team. A few days later, Jim was arrested, calm as ever. The news spread like wildfire through the neighborhood, and people couldn't stop gossiping about the tension between Jim and Melissa. They said Jim had asked to borrow money from Melissa many times, but she not only turned him down, she also mocked him about it. Comments like, "That's what happens when you make bad life choices." Or, "See, you should have gone to college, right?" slowly turned his simmering resentment into uncontrollable anger. Sometimes words can be dangerous weapons. We don't even realize we're pushing someone right to the edge between good and evil. In the days after, I couldn't stop thinking about everything that happened. A murder had taken place right next door, and I had no clue. Even now, I get chills every time I think about that night, me lying in my room, just steps away from where Melissa was in danger. If I had listened more closely to the weird sounds that night, if I had paid more attention to all the little things that felt off, could I have saved her? Now in my 20s, the what-ifs still haunt me. Even though time has passed, I've never really gotten over it. Melissa wasn't just a victim of Jim, but maybe also a victim of the silence and indifference from the whole neighborhood, including me. In 2014, when I was 11 years old, my family had just moved from Tennessee to Texas, staying at my aunt's house for the first few days. Everything was fine, a large but very harmonious and happy family. That day, the adults in the house had plans to go out for dinner and repeatedly told us not to go outside. My aunt even added seriously that there had been some strange happenings recently, and my older sister and I were responsible for watching over the younger ones, ideally staying inside. We nodded, promising we wouldn't go anywhere, but of course, we were lying. As soon as the adults left, I persuaded my 17-year-old sister Kiva, along with my younger sister and cousin Peyton, to sneak out and buy snacks. At first, the plan was just to buy Ben & Jerry's ice cream, but on the way, Jack in the Box suddenly seemed like a more appealing choice. We turned on Bruno Mars and Meghan Trainor music, laughing and chatting the whole way. None of us knew that this night would haunt us forever. When we arrived, the drive-thru was packed, so we decided to go inside the store to order, and that was a mistake. Inside, the store was nearly empty, with only the cashier and a girl there, so she became the only focus of our attention at the time. The girl was quite petite, wearing a thick jacket even though the weather was already transitioning into summer. She walked up to the counter and ordered just one Sprite, but when the cashier handed it to her, she didn't drink it right away. Instead, she held it up close to her eyes, as though inspecting something inside. Then, she placed it back on the counter, dipped her finger into the cup, stirred it slowly, and then brought her finger to her mouth, licking it while keeping her eyes wide open, staring intensely at the cashier. We couldn't take our eyes off the scene, but the real horror began when she suddenly turned around. We froze when facing her gaze. Her eyes were unnaturally wide, not blinking at all. I instinctively grabbed Peyton's and my younger sister's arms. "What the hell is that?" Peyton muttered. None of us reacted further as she turned and walked out of the door. "Oh my God, she's holding a knife!" Peyton exclaimed. We didn't know what to do, looking at the cashier. He was also stunned, still seemingly trapped by that haunting stare. My sister went up to order food, since we were there already, while the rest of us stood by the glass door watching. The girl was crossing the street, not running, not in a hurry, and not looking left or right. A car slammed on the brakes, honking loudly, nearly hitting her, but she didn't stop, not even reacting. We looked at each other. "Let's go," my sister whispered. As we were leaving Jack in the Box, I looked across the street. She had gone into CVS. We planned to call it a night and drive home to enjoy our snacks. But just then, police sirens blared. We sat in the car, holding our breath, watching closely. Around 4 police cars rushed into the CVS parking lot, their lights flashing red all down the street. One officer pulled out his gun and entered. Our curiosity kept us from leaving, so we drove closer to listen to what was happening. As we entered the parking lot, one officer stopped our car. "What are you kids doing here?" I was speechless, but Peyton quickly responded. "We were just at Jack in the Box across the street and saw a girl with a knife go into here." The officer quickly spoke into his radio. He looked back at us, frowning. "You kids should go home." We nodded and quickly drove off. When we got home, we thought everything was over. But no. As the family was getting ready for bed, my mom called us down to the living room. "Your dad and I want to know, what did you all do tonight?" We looked at each other, embarrassed, about to make up a story to avoid trouble, but it was pointless. Our parents already knew everything. A Facebook post had called our dad Hero Girls for providing important information about the girl with the knife. Heroes? Not at all. We were just curious. Then my mom told us the chilling truth. The girl had gone into CVS, grabbed a woman's hair, pressed the knife to her neck, and threatened her for several minutes before the police could restrain her. No one was hurt, but if we hadn't been lucky, the woman she threatened could have been one of us. It seemed like the story had ended, but a few days later, Peyton received a message from an unknown number. "What did you see?" We looked at each other, hearts pounding. That entire night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining her eyes wide, as if she didn't belong to this world. I never went back to that Jack in the Box again. That awful night went down 13 years ago when I was 15. My family had a log cabin tucked away among tall pine trees, not too far from the Blue Mountains. It was the place we always ran off to every summer to get away from the crazy heat in the city. For a kid like me, the woods and the lakes felt like a whole world full of endless adventures. That summer, my parents had to take my little sister to the doctor because she kept having this stubborn high fever. They trusted me to stay at the cabin by myself, promising they'd be back before sunset. I had Zoe, my loyal Labrador retriever, and a satellite phone in case I needed to call for help. For a 15-year-old, getting to be home alone felt like a badge of honor. I figured I'd make the most of it and go fishing, so I grabbed my dad's old fishing rod and hollered for Zoe to come with me. The air was crisp and cool. Birds singing all through the forest made it feel like the trees had their own band. I picked my usual fishing spot, this little rock sticking out into the lake, where you could see the whole stretch of that blue water. Zoe plopped down next to me, her snout resting on her front paws, her eyes keeping a sharp lookout. I cast my line into the water and waited. Time dragged on in a slow, peaceful way. A little fish nibbled on the hook. I yanked it up, but it slipped off, leaving me sitting there feeling pretty bummed out. About an hour drifted by, and that's when I started to feel something shift. At first, it was just this quick, creepy feeling, like someone brushed the back of my neck with an icy finger. Zoe picked up on it too. She slowly got to her feet, the fur on the back of her neck standing straight up, and her ears perked up like she was on high alert. I followed Zoe's stare over to the opposite side of the lake. At first, all I saw were a bunch of tall oaks and pines. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught some movement. There was a figure standing dead still between two trees, tucked away in the shadows. My heart was pounding like crazy in my chest, I just knew it. But from that far away, I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. All I knew was, whoever it was, they were staring right at us. Zoe started to growl low in her throat like a warning. I laid my hand on her neck, trying to calm her down, but my eyes never left that weird figure. The figure started moving, slow and steady along the shoreline, never taking their eyes off of us. They were heading toward the old dam, where the shore got real narrow and you could cross over to our side in just a few minutes. Fear started bubbling up inside me, and for a second, all I could think about were the ghost stories the locals used to tell. Stories about some child predator who'd been lurking around these parts for years, with a bunch of missing kids that were never found. Maybe it was just stories to freak people out, but right then, facing that creepy figure, every one of those stories felt way too real. The figure kept moving, and now I could see a little clearer. It was a tall man. His walk was all jerky and weird, like something wasn't right. Zoe growled louder, and I knew right then we had to get out of there. With my hands shaking, I reeled the line in as fast as I could, not even bothering to pack up the rod. I grabbed Zoe's collar with my other hand and started backing away from the lake, keeping my eyes glued to that creepy guy. He had stopped, just stood there like a freaking statue at the edge of the trees, only a few dozen meters from the dam. Then, real slow, he lifted his head and locked eyes with me. That's when I dropped the fishing rod and bolted, with Zoe tearing off right beside me. We didn't even try to stick to the trail, just tore straight through the woods, crashing through bushes and stumbling over tree roots sticking out of the ground. I didn't dare look back, too scared he was already crossing the dam and coming after us. Every time a branch snapped behind me, it felt like my heart was going to blow right out of my chest. I tripped over a root and scraped my knee, but I didn't even slow down. Fear just kept me flying. When the cabin finally came into sight, I sprinted through the front door and slammed it shut, locking it tight. I yanked down all the curtains, turning the place into my own little fortress. Zoe kept pacing back and forth in the living room, stopping every once in a while to glare out the window. Her ears perked up and this low growl rumbling from her throat. I thought about Dad's shotgun locked up in the bedroom closet. Dad had shown me how to use it. always hammering it into my head that it wasn't a toy. I knew exactly where he kept the key, tucked away in his fishing tackle box. With hands still shaking, I opened up the locker, grabbed the shotgun, and checked it. It was loaded. I wasn't planning on using it, just keeping it around for a worst-case thing. The next few hours crawled by with me wound up tight as a spring. I sat there in the living room, my back pressed against the wall, staring out the window with the shotgun right next to me. Zoe was curled up close, sometimes getting up to check outside, but she wasn't growling anymore. Maybe whatever it was had moved on, or maybe the guy hadn't crossed the lake to get anywhere near the cabin. I thought about calling my parents on the satellite phone, but then I changed my mind. My sister was burning up with a fever. They had enough to deal with without me adding more stress. And maybe it was all just in my head. Maybe the guy was just some random hiker, and I'd freak everyone out over nothing. The sun started dipping behind the mountains, and little by little, darkness swallowed up the cabin. When the headlights from our car finally lit up the driveway, I swear I almost cried right there. My parents walked in looking beat. My sister already passed out asleep in Mom's arms. They were kind of surprised to see me still awake, and even more surprised when they spotted the shotgun sitting next to me. I told them everything, about the creepy guy by the lake, about feeling like someone was watching us, about the straight-up terror that had me frozen for hours. My dad listened real carefully, and little by little, the tired look on his face got replaced by something a whole lot more serious. The next morning, Dad and a couple of neighbors hiked down along the shore to see if they could find any sign of the guy. They found these big boot prints sunk deep into the wet mud right where I said I saw him. The tracks led straight to the dam, then vanished into the thick woods on the other side, heading right for our cabin. 2 weeks later, the cops picked up some guy in a town not too far away. They thought he might be the one behind a bunch of cabin break-ins, and even some attacks on kids around the area. At his house, the cops found this super creepy stash of little things he'd stolen from cabins around the lake. Necklaces, toys, even the backpack of a boy who went missing 2 years back. When the cops showed me a picture of him, I couldn't say for sure if it was the same guy I saw at the lake. But there's one thing I'll never forget. Those eyes, cold and calculating. In the years after that, we still went back to the cabin every summer, but it just wasn't the same anymore. I never wandered off by myself again, always stuck close to Dad or some other adult. The woods and lakes didn't feel like some magical adventure land anymore. Now they felt like the kind of place where danger could be hiding anywhere. The Texas sun was scorching hot when we arrived at the farm. This was a long-planned vacation for the three of us, me, Michael, and Carlos. We went to a fishing lake in West Texas, far from the noisy city, with only nature around us. Hey, you guys need to be careful. This lake has some special fish, and stay away from the north side. There's a very aggressive beehive over there. A man with a serious look in his eyes watched us, holding a fishing rod. He was probably a regular here. We nodded, but none of us really paid attention. We had cold beers, some snacks, and a cool lake. What could possibly ruin this day? Michael was the most excited. I heard there are some big fish here. We found a spot by the lake, set up our fishing rods, and enjoyed the sun. Michael and Carlos were arguing about which bait was the most effective, while I just wanted to enjoy the peace. I'm going to take a walk, I said to them, standing up and stretching. Don't go too far, Carlos warned me. I waved my hand. Don't worry, I'm just going to walk around a bit. I walked along the lake shore, enjoying the wild scenery. At first I didn't notice, but then the buzzing got louder and closer. I realized I had accidentally walked into the north side, where the beehive was that the man had warned us about. Before I could react, a bee stung my neck. Then another one stung my hand. I screamed and turned around. A black swarm of bees was flying toward me. Michael! Carlos! Help! I yelled and ran toward them. They both jumped up when they saw me and then saw the bees chasing me. The chase began. The three of us ran as fast as we could, waving our hands in the air, yelling at the top of our lungs. Jump in the lake, Michael yelled. Without thinking, all three of us jumped into the dark, cool water. Swim far away from the shore. Wait for the bees to leave, Carlos shouted. Michael and I did as he said. We swam farther and farther from the shore. We had swum into the deeper water. The frantic buzzing of the bees slowly faded away. We had escaped, but in an instant, I felt a sharp sting in my right leg. What was that? I asked, looking down at the water in a panic, but the water was too murky to see anything. Then Michael started screaming. Something's biting me! He thrashed violently, splashing water everywhere. I felt a second pain, then a third, on the same leg. It felt like someone was using a knife to cut my skin. Fish! They're carnivorous fish. Swim to shore. Hurry! Carlos yelled. Carlos had quickly swum to shore. I tried to swim after him, but each kick was a terrible pain. I heard Michael screaming behind me, but I didn't dare to turn back and look. Survival is the strongest instinct. The water around me started to turn red. I tried to swim faster, but the pain was slowing me down. Jake, hurry! Carlos was standing on the shore, waving his hands frantically. I used all my strength to swim to the shore. With each passing second, I felt more fish attacking my leg. It hurt so much that I couldn't scream anymore. Only groans escaped my throat. Finally, my hand touched the mud. Carlos pulled me onto the shore, and I collapsed. Oh my God, my leg. I didn't dare to look down. Where's Michael? Carlos asked, looking out at the lake. We couldn't see Michael anywhere. There were only red ripples spreading on the water where he had been. Carlos quickly wrapped his shirt around my leg, trying to stop the bleeding. Michael didn't make it, Carlos said, shaking his head, tears streaming down his cheeks. I tried to sit up, but the pain almost made me pass out. I looked down at my leg, a sight that would haunt me forever. Most of my right foot was gone. The bones, tendons, and flesh were torn apart, revealing a chaotic mess. The bones of my foot were stark white, and the two remaining toes were dangling by thin strands of flesh. I started to vomit. I called 911. They're on their way, Carlos said, trembling. I nodded, unable to say anything. The pain was drowning out all my thoughts. I felt cold, even though the Texas sun was still scorching us. The police found Michael's body 2 hours later when the rescue team arrived. I was put in the ambulance and given an IV, but I still insisted on staying until I could see Michael with my own eyes. What was left of Michael was unrecognizable. The fish had eaten most of his face, leaving only empty eye sockets and pieces of his skull. The rest of his body wasn't much better, a skeleton with a few remnants of flesh. Carlos and I were speechless when we saw that scene. After the accident at the lake, the doctors tried, but my foot was too badly infected. They had to amputate my entire foot. I'm learning to walk with a prosthetic leg. Carlos visits me every week. I know he's also struggling with guilt because we made it to shore, but Michael didn't. Every night, I find myself in that lake, the feeling of sharp teeth sinking into my flesh. Michael screams as he was pulled under. I don't think I'll ever swim again. Even taking a shower makes me panic. Every time I look down at my leg, I see the fish, hundreds of them with their sharp teeth. My name is David. I'm 32 years old and work as a mechanic at a small garage in Arizona. After my divorce from Kate last March, I only get to see my son, Bobby, on weekends. He's 6 now and absolutely loves hamburgers, so nearly every weekend, I take him to Burger King. It's become our little ritual, something familiar and comforting every time we're together. That day was just like any other. I picked Bobby up at 9 a.m. After a quick stop at the bookstore, we headed to Burger King around 11. Bobby hopped out of the car and ran excitedly toward the big glass doors. I followed, smiling at his joy. "Dad, look!" Bobby suddenly shouted. I looked in the direction he pointed. Standing near the entrance was a Burger King mascot, waving cheerfully at us. Bobby waved back, grinning. We went inside, ordered food, and sat at a table by the window. Bobby chatted about school, laughing and talking a mile a minute. I savored every second with him. When we left, the mascot was still there. Bobby paused to touch the costume, grinning. The next weekend, we came again, but left around 3 p.m. In the rearview mirror, I saw the Burger King mascot step out from the shadows on the side of the building. It wouldn't have been that strange, except he was holding a wrench. He began walking toward us, slow, steady. Something felt wrong. I grabbed Bobby's hand and rushed him toward the car. Best not to provoke him. We made it inside, but the moment the doors closed, the man lunged forward. He slammed the wrench into the passenger side mirror, shattering it completely. The sound of glass breaking made Bobby scream. I hit the gas and sped onto the road. In the rearview mirror, I could still see the mascot standing in the parking lot, wrench in hand, motionless. When we got home, I called the Burger King manager. They told me no one had been scheduled to wear the mascot suit that day. I filed a police report, but they said they needed more solid evidence. I began to suspect maybe he was a drug addict hallucinating. Either way, he was dangerous. Over the next few weeks, I decided to take Bobby to another Burger King. We gradually forgot about the bizarre incident. A few weeks later, on a hot summer afternoon, Bobby came to stay with me. We were cooking dinner, laughing, having fun. Later that night, while watching TV, the power suddenly went out. "Stay here, buddy. I'll grab the flashlight." I headed to the kitchen, opened the drawer, and started searching. Probably just a blackout in the neighborhood. Then I heard Bobby's voice from the living room. "Dad, there's someone outside the door." Flashlight in hand, I ran back. Bobby was standing by the window. "It's the big burger guy," he gasped. My heart dropped. I aimed the flashlight outside through the glass, but it was pitch dark. I saw nothing. Then I turned toward the front door and realized it was unlocked. I had forgotten to lock it when we came home. The hinges creaked. Someone was slowly pushing the door open. "Bobby, go to my bedroom. Lock the door." Bobby ran into the room. The front door was completely open. A dark figure walked in, wearing a Burger King mascot costume. The stench spread, and he still had the wrench in his hand. The mascot stood still at the door for a few seconds, as if observing. I held the flashlight tightly. My other hand fumbled for my phone in my pocket and dialed the police as quickly as possible. "What do you want?" The person didn't answer. He walked slowly toward me. I backed into the kitchen looking for the knife. He chased after me, raising the wrench high. I dodged, and the wrench hit the kitchen cabinet. I grabbed the meat cleaver and turned to face him. He rushed forward, and I stabbed the knife toward the giant burger head. The knife was stuck in his shoulder, but he still hadn't fallen. He swung the wrench, hitting my shoulder. I screamed, stopping for a few seconds. He took the opportunity to continue swinging the wrench twice more, hitting my back and chest. "Dad!" Bobby cried loudly. The boy stood at the door and witnessed everything. Taking advantage of that moment, I jumped up and pushed the intruder down. The giant burger head flew out, and long brown hair fell down. It was Kate, my ex-wife. She was lying on the floor, her eyes bloodshot, her face pale. Her long hair was sticky with sweat. "Why did you do that?" Sarah gasped, looking at me with a strange look. "Do you think you can take my child?" "Bobby will be afraid of you. He just wants to be with me." I stood there, stunned. So Kate was behind all this horror. A few minutes later, the police arrived. They handcuffed Kate and put her in the car. I hugged Bobby, who couldn't stop crying. From inside the police car, Kate looked at us with hateful eyes. The next day, the lawyer said that Kate had been severely depressed since the divorce. She rented a mascot costume and followed us for months. The goal was to make Bobby afraid to be with me. Kate will be receiving psychological treatment in the near future. Then we will go to court to renegotiate custody. Bobby doesn't want to go to Burger King anymore. He often asks about his mother, but I don't know how to explain everything to him. All I can do is hold him close and whisper, "Everything will be okay, son." I'm Lori, and I live with my parents and younger brother in Millfield, Ohio. That night was the 4th of July. I was sitting on the sofa flipping through TV channels when the first firework exploded. "Lori, can I have some hot chocolate?" My brother Josh called from the kitchen. "Hot chocolate in July, are you sure?" I chuckled softly, but still got up to make it for him. I was 18 and used to taking care of Josh when my parents were out. My parents had gone to Akron to visit Aunt Margaret because she broke her leg. They'd be back late, probably after midnight. Before they left, Mom had repeatedly told me, "Lock the doors securely, don't open for anyone, and call me right away if anything happens." I walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge for milk. I looked out the window. The neighbors' houses were lit up, and the sounds of families laughing and watching fireworks drifted in. "Lori, someone's in the backyard." Josh's voice suddenly turned serious. I turned to see Josh standing by the living room window, the curtain pulled back just a crack. It's probably Mr. Henderson watering his plants. I poured milk into the pot. It's not Mr. Henderson. They're wearing a white lab coat, like a doctor. I turned off the stove and walked to the window. Josh stepped back, his face pale. I looked out. In the dim light from the porch lamp, I saw a figure standing by the fence, their back to me. The man was tall and thin, wearing a white lab coat and black pants. He stood silently, as if observing something. It's probably a doctor from the hospital. Maybe someone got hurt by fireworks. I offered a logical explanation, but my heart started pounding faster. The man turned around. His face was pale, his dark eyes staring directly at the window. He smiled stiffly. "Lori, I know you're in there." His voice echoed through the glass. I flinched, pulling Josh away from the window. The man stepped closer. My blood ran cold. I pulled out my phone, but my hand shook too hard and it fell to the ground. "Lori, I don't want to hurt you." He was now right at the door, placing his hand on the glass. "You wish you could be a better sister, right, Lori?" Josh suddenly burst into tears. "What is he talking about, Lori?" I hugged him tight, my brain spinning, trying to make sense of it. Why would he know that? Suddenly, a loud crash of breaking glass. The man had smashed the kitchen window. He reached in, unlocked it, and climbed into the house. "Run!" I pulled Josh upstairs, my heart pounding like a drum. We ran into my parents' room. I locked the door. "Lori, don't run anymore. I just want to help." His footsteps echoed from downstairs, slow and steady. He wasn't rushing, as if he knew we couldn't escape. Josh trembled in my arms. "Lori, I'm scared. I don't want to die." "You won't die. I'll protect you." I looked around the room for something to defend myself with. In my mom's dresser drawer was a box cutter. I grabbed it, the small blade trembling in my hand. "Lori, do you remember the day it happened? The day the stray bullet flew into the playground?" The man's voice now sounded like it was right outside the bedroom door. "You witnessed Josh die right there." "No!" I screamed. "Josh is still here. He's alive." The man's voice echoed through the wooden door. "Lori, you've been living in an illusion for the past 5 years. Josh has been dead for a long time." I looked down at Josh in my arms. He was still trembling, still breathing, still warm. "That's not true. Josh is still here." The door opened even though I had locked it securely. The man stepped in. "Lori, it's time you face the truth." He reached out to us. I swung the small knife, trying to protect Josh, but when I looked down, my arms were empty. Josh was gone. Light suddenly flooded the room. My mom's voice echoed from downstairs. "Lori! We're home." I blinked. The man had vanished. I was sitting alone in my parents' room, the knife stuck in the wooden wall. My parents ran up, their faces full of worry. "Lori, what are you doing here? Why are you holding a knife?" I looked around the room, searching. "Where's Josh? Where is Josh?" Mom knelt beside me and burst into tears. "Lori, Josh passed away 5 years ago." I stared at my parents in shock. Memories of that day flooded back. Josh lying in a pool of blood on the playground, the sirens and screams. I held him in my arms, begging him not to die, but it was too late. No, Josh is alive. I just talked to him. Dad placed a hand on my shoulder. Lori, we're taking you back to the hospital. Dr. Peter will help you. I sat there trembling. In the corner of the room, I still saw the shadow of the man in the white lab coat. So he was my doctor. But I knew very well that no matter how much medication I took, or how many doctors I saw, the terrifying feeling and the pain of losing Josh would always stay with me. Outside the window, fireworks still bloomed in the Ohio summer night sky. But for me, summer had ended a long time ago. There are moments in life you wish you could erase from memory. For me, that was the summer night in 2006. 20 years have passed, but I still wake up every night with the image of Mark. Or rather, what was left of him. That year, Mark, my best friend since high school, and Joey, a young colleague, planned a 3-day camping trip to Harold Parker State Forest, Massachusetts. We need to escape the machine noise. It's time to relax after a long period, Mark said as we packed our gear. He was always the most energetic one in the group. We set off on a weekend morning, Mark's pickup truck loaded with tents, sleeping bags, and canned food. Joey sat in the middle, constantly telling spooky stories about the forest. The first 2 days passed peacefully. We fished by the small lake, grilled smoked meat over a campfire, and told old stories. Mark could laugh heartily at Joey's silly jokes. Everything was so peaceful. I felt my body truly relaxed after months. On the second night, I woke up to a sound outside the tent. It sounded like footsteps on dry leaves. I looked around and didn't see Mark, only heard Joey's heavy snoring. I unzipped the tent and poked my head out. The campfire had completely died out, leaving only a few red embers. I turned to wake Joey. Do you know where Mark went? Joey rubbed his eyes, looking around. Maybe he went to pee and will be right back. But 15 minutes passed, and Mark still didn't return. I started to feel uneasy. Mark wasn't one to play these kinds of jokes. We grabbed flashlights and started searching. Hey, David! Joey called out from the trail. I ran to him. The flashlight beam shone on a blue t-shirt, Mark's shirt. It was discarded by the side of the trail. We need to find him quickly. We followed the trail, finding another one of Mark's belongings every few meters, jeans, sneakers, even the watch he cherished so much. The night wind rustled through the leaves. Joey walked close beside me, his breathing heavy in the cold air. This isn't normal, Joey whispered. The trail started to narrow, flanked by dense tree trunks. The flashlight beam only illuminated a few meters ahead. I tried to swallow, but my throat was as dry as a desert. My legs felt heavy. David, I don't think we should continue. But I couldn't stop. Mark was my best friend. I had to find him. Finally, the trail led to a small clearing. I raised my flashlight, the light sweeping from left to right. At first, I only saw dirt and dry leaves. Then the light stopped in the middle of the clearing. My heart stopped for a few seconds. I adjusted the flashlight to see more clearly. A person lay face down on the ground, unclothed, but where the head should be, there was nothing. Joey immediately vomited, and I stood there like a stone statue, unable to believe my eyes. No way. I screamed. I slowly walked forward, my trembling legs disobeying me. The flashlight in my hand shook. I silently prayed this wasn't Mark. But then I saw the small mole on his left shoulder, the V-shaped scar on his back from when Mark fell off his bike at 12 years old, the silver ring on his thumb. Oh my God, Mark. My stomach clenched. I retched, my body shaking with spasms. Joey sobbed behind me. I stumbled to my feet, my legs weak. Everything around me spun. I grabbed Joey's arm, and we both helped each other out of this horrific clearing. We ran through the forest like two madmen, crashing into tree trunks and stumbling, but not daring to stop. Our gasps echoed in the darkness. Back at the camp, I threw everything I could grab into the truck, mumbling incessantly. Joey sat on the ground, holding his head and crying. I had to pull him into the car and start the engine. The drive back to town was a nightmare. I drove at a frantic pace, Joey still vomiting uncontrollably. As soon as we were out of the forest, we stopped and called the police. The police quickly arrived, cordoned off the area, and examined the body while we couldn't go back there. I sat at the police station, moving like a robot, constantly answering questions. The police searched the entire forest, but found no sign of Mark's head, no murder weapon, no scattered blood. The case slowly became a cold file in the police department's archives. 20 years have passed. I got married and moved to California. But Mark's death remains a haunting nightmare that never fades. I often dream of him, dream of the flashlight beams shining on that headless neck. I don't know what took Mark, but I know one thing for sure. It wasn't something a human could explain. Some stories stick with you, even years later. They haunt me late at night. The story of the Miller family is one of them. It's not because of how violent their deaths were, but because of what I found out afterward. That year, I was 23 and lived with my family in the quiet little town of Franklin, Tennessee. The Millers lived 2 houses down from us. David Miller was a mechanic, and his wife taught elementary school. They had an 11-year-old daughter named Lily. Lily was a unique kid. Her skin was pale, almost anemic looking, and her eyes were cold. She didn't have that carefree innocence you'd expect for her age. While other kids played outside, Lily would just stand by the fence, staring. I tried talking to Lily many times, but all I got back was an empty stare. That August, the distant wail of police sirens broke the peaceful afternoon. I was coming home from work when I saw police cars and ambulances crammed in front of the Miller's house. Neighbors were gathered, whispering. They said they'd heard loud bangs earlier, possibly gunshots. I was so confused and worried that I hung around to see what was happening. The police taped off the area, and about an hour later, 2 black body bags were carried out of the house. News quickly spread through the neighborhood. David had shot his wife, and then himself. Lily survived by hiding in the bathroom and calling 911. The whole town was in shock over the tragic event. Everyone felt terrible for the Millers, especially Lily. How could a child possibly get over losing both parents in one night? Poor kid, a neighbor said, wiping away tears. I kept thinking about Lily being led out of the house. She wasn't crying, her eyes fixed straight ahead. At the time, I figured the shock was so immense that it had shut down all her emotions. The police concluded that David had suffered a mental breakdown due to work stress, leading to the horrific incident. At the funeral, I couldn't take my eyes off Lily. She sat upright in the front row, wearing a black dress. A lot of people from town came to the funeral. Everyone was crying, feeling deeply for Lily's situation. They came to offer her words of encouragement and hugs. But Lily just sat there silently in the front row, her eyes never leaving the 2 caskets. A few days after the funeral, her aunt from Memphis picked her up to raise her. Life in town slowly went back to normal. A few weeks later, a friend who worked at the police department invited me out for a beer. We talked about a lot of things, and eventually, the conversation drifted to the Miller case. There was something off about it. The bathroom door wasn't locked. Lily was just standing there, like she was waiting for us to arrive. There was no sign that she'd been through anything traumatic. What do you think? Ben shook his head, taking a long swig of his beer. I've been in this job for 10 years. Kids who witness violence usually react in one of 2 ways. Either they're so shocked they can't say anything, or they scream hysterically. Lily was different, too calm. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then he spoke again. It's for the peace of mind of those left behind. They have to move on with their lives. The Miller story gradually faded into just another local tale, with people in town occasionally bringing it up, mostly curious about how Lily was doing now. 3 years later, a couple moved in and bought the Miller house. They started renovating the entire place. They left a bunch of stuff out in the yard and by the front gate for anyone who wanted to take it for free. I was walking by and saw a notebook in a box of old things. Curious, I picked it up. The first page said, Lily's Diary. My heart suddenly started pounding faster. I don't know when that name began to stir such mixed feelings in me. I turned to the next page, which had crude but chilling drawings. A man, a tiny child. My brain automatically processed the information in a way I didn't want it to. Below the drawings were lines of pencil writing, some pressed so hard they tore the paper. Dad hurt me again. Mom knew but didn't say anything. At this point, my hands started to tremble. I kept turning the pages. I can't run away. I screamed, but no one heard me. Mom said I had to be good, but why be good to bad things? Each page opened up a piece of hell. A sentence was repeated on many pages, each time written more clearly. No one came to help me, so I helped myself. When I turned to the last few pages, the true meaning finally emerged. The drawings changed. No longer a victim, Lily began to draw herself as someone with power. She drew her dad lying next to a gun. Lily wrote, "I'm almost ready. They won't hurt me anymore. It will be like in the movies." I stood frozen, the notebook dropping to the ground. So Lily wasn't just a surviving victim. She was both a victim and the one who did it. Lily had quietly endured abuse. When she realized no one was coming to save her, she decided to save herself, in the only way an 11-year-old child could think of. Honestly, my emotions were incredibly mixed at that moment. I burned it that night and never told anyone about it. I decided I'd be the only one who knew the truth. Lily was living a different life now, and I was sure it was a much better one. The town was still peaceful, and the new couple who moved in, they were getting ready for a new life too. The best thing was to just let everything go. Life sometimes isn't what we imagine. Whether they are victims or perpetrators, everyone carries their own pain and untold stories. We can never truly know everything someone endures, and sometimes silence is the only way to protect yourself. 12 years have passed since that night, but I still can't forget the look in his eyes when he was looking at us from the shadows. Every time someone mentions camping, my heart beats faster. Those images come rushing back as if they had just happened. It was the last week of summer before I went back to the University of Texas, Austin. I was 20, and Jess and Katie were both 19. We decided to go on a hiking and overnight camping trip at Big Bend National Park. It was a place that the three of us had never been to. That afternoon, we drove from Dallas to Southwest Texas. On the way, I suggested we stop to buy some beer to drink around the campfire. Katie volunteered to go into the Shell gas station in Alpine to buy it, even though none of us were old enough. Jess and I waited in the car. We watched Katie walk into the store. 5 minutes later, Katie came back out with her hands empty and a disappointed look on her face. She shook her head when she opened the car door. We all understood. We decided to give up on the idea of drinking beer. We were about to leave when a voice from outside the driver's side window startled me. I turned and saw a young man. He had a friendly smile and bright eyes. There was nothing alarming about his appearance, but the way he suddenly appeared next to the car made me feel uneasy. He offered to buy the beer for us. We looked at each other blankly for a few seconds, but we finally agreed. We figured he was just a friendly person who wanted to help. He went into the store. 5 minutes later, he came back out with a cold case of beer. He gave Katie the change, but instead of leaving, he just stood there as if he was waiting for something. Katie thanked him again, but the man still didn't leave. I felt uncomfortable and quickly started the car. As we drove out of the gas station, I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw him still standing there. He watched us until we turned onto the main road. We went back to our camping trip. We didn't think much about it anymore. 2 hours later, we arrived at Big Bend and started our hike into the woods. The afternoon passed normally, but as dusk began to fall, I started to hear strange sounds, the sound of breaking branches, the rustling of leaves. Every time I turned to check, all I saw was the silent forest. I thought it might be wildlife, but the feeling of unease didn't leave me. When it got dark, we lit a campfire and drank our beer. The night air was chilly. The sounds of insects from everywhere created the familiar symphony of the wilderness. But suddenly, Jess stopped talking mid-sentence. She whispered and asked if we heard anything. We listened in silence. Something was moving in the bushes. Katie said it might be wildlife. We decided to go into the tent early. I lay in my sleeping bag, listening to the sounds around me. The wind blowing through the leaves, the sound of an owl hooting in the distance, and then another sound, the sound of light footsteps. Slowly, it came closer to the tent. I whispered to Jess and Katie, but they were both asleep. The footsteps stopped right outside the tent. I held my breath. I closed my eyes tightly. I wished that the sound would go away. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps moved away. I waited another 10 minutes before I decided to go outside and check the campfire. I needed to make sure I put out all the embers to be safe. I slowly unzipped the tent and stepped outside. I grabbed my water bottle and walked toward the campfire. As I was bending down to put out the embers, a rustling sound right behind me made me freeze in place. I slowly turned around. I was shocked to see the man from the gas station standing just a few feet away. In the firelight, I clearly recognized his purple striped shirt and his face. What made me feel so cold wasn't that he had followed us for hundreds of miles from Alpine. It was the way he stood there, completely silent, just staring at me. I finally screamed at him to get away from me. The man didn't say anything. He took a step back. Then he turned and ran into the woods. I quickly ran back into the tent. My hands were shaking as I unzipped the zipper. I woke up Jess and Katie. I told them what had just happened. We panicked. We packed our things. We only used the light of a small flashlight. The hike back to the car was in tense silence. Every sound made us jump. Every shadow could have been him. None of us dared to speak loudly. We only whispered necessary directions. When we got back to the car, we quickly shoved our stuff in the trunk and drove out of the park. The entire way back to Dallas, no one talked about calling the police. We just wanted to get home safely as soon as possible. When we got to Jess's house around 3 a.m., I decided to call the local police in Alpine. I described the man and the incident at the gas station. Katie was worried that we would get in trouble for the beer, but I felt like I had to report it. The police officer took my statement, but he said they needed more concrete evidence to act. They promised to patrol the area more often. Years have passed. We never found out who that man was or what he wanted. Maybe he was just a person with strange behavior, but we can't rule out that he had more sinister intentions. I will never know the truth, but when I saw him standing there in the dark after having followed us all day, it was the feeling of a prey discovering the predator, and I will never forget it. I have social anxiety disorder, and I used it as an excuse to isolate myself. My older brother, Keon, was the opposite, always outgoing and extroverted. Keon convinced me to join him on a hiking trip in the Gila National Forest this weekend. I got to Keon's place to get ready for the trip, and that's when I found out he'd invited other people to come along. I only caught the name of his girlfriend, Leora, because I was still half asleep. 3 people squeezed into the back seat. Keon and Leora sat up front. The 3-hour drive was spent in total silence. When we got to the parking lot near the Gila Cliff dwellings, we found out the West Fork Trail had been closed all summer due to flooding. This meant we wouldn't be running into any other hikers. Keon planned for us to complete a long, roughly 30-mile loop of the Gila and be back by Sunday. The first day was pretty quiet. We looked at the scenery, soaked up the sun, and breathed the fresh air. Since I wasn't used to hiking, I kept getting left behind. I tried to talk to Keon and Leora about work, but with the 2 others, it was only very brief conversation. The climb to the top was awful for me, with almost no shade. I was dripping with sweat and gasping for breath. Once I reached the peak, I thought about turning back, but I didn't know the way, and I couldn't spot the trail markers. More than anything, I didn't want to return to my empty apartment and befriend loneliness. We made camp on a dry section. Kian told an embarrassing story about the first time he met Leora. When it was my turn, I made up a story about ripping my pants during a job interview. I felt terrible for lying while everyone else was sharing honest things. That night, I woke up to use the restroom. As I was almost finished, Neva's voice rang out from the darkness, asking if I had a lighter. We whispered a few short sentences, then she headed back to her tent. I also returned to my tent a few minutes later. I tried to fall back asleep, but the sounds of the forest started to become clear. I lay there listening until I drifted off without realizing it. The next morning, everyone gathered around the campfire with tired faces. Someone made coffee and recounted what they'd heard. They said they heard long howls and growls coming from the woods all night. Kian said it might be Mexican gray wolves, but they were very rare in this area. We continued our journey. The second day was a little better. The sun was hidden by clouds, so the temperature was much more pleasant. We crossed a few rivers, set up camp at midday, and boiled river water to drink. That evening, I stayed up with Ryan. He asked to borrow the map to plan a visit to a nearby creek. I took the map from Kian's backpack and handed it to him. The next morning, I woke up to Kian angrily rummaging through his backpack. He couldn't find the map and started getting frustrated. I said I had given it to Ryan. Kian stared at me. Who is Ryan? Leora walked in and complained that we needed the map because the trails here weren't cleared. That's when it hit me. I had given the map to a random stranger in the woods. Kian said he remembered most of the trail landmarks, but because the trail was closed and overgrown, things were harder. By midday, the tension was unbearable. When I stepped closer to Lise, he suddenly let out an animalistic growl. He slowly hunched down, putting his hands and feet on the ground. His mouth was wide open, revealing jagged, broken teeth. Then he let out a hiss and bolted into the woods, not running on 2 feet like a person, but with a bizarre, loping gait. That's when the frightening truth dawned on me. Liz, Ryan, Neva, these people had never existed. They were just false memories I thought were real. I didn't tell anyone this, thinking I would try to get through the rest of the trip without imagining anything else or causing any more trouble. That night, no one could sleep. We sat around the campfire, listening to the high-pitched howls and screams all around us. As I sat lost in thought, Leora came over. She confessed about arguing with Kian and worried about their relationship. She said she was happy to have me here, and I felt something deep inside me stir. I told her about the door, about the incident that caused my social anxiety. In that moment, under the moonlight, I did the worst thing. I kissed her. I looked into her eyes and realized I loved her. I held her in my arms, afraid that if I let go, I would lose this perfect moment. The next morning, I woke up excited because of the night before. I hadn't thought about Kian or the consequences. I decided to tell Kian before the truth came out. I started to confess, but Leora's scream cut me off. Kian and I ran over. Leora had discovered that the items in the backpack, the compass, food, and water, were gone. While Kian and Leora were both relieved and confused, I suddenly realized the Leora I kissed last night was not the real Leora. I had poured out my heart and given my love to something wearing a human disguise. I felt utterly disgusted and confused. We continued hiking, utterly exhausted. The lack of water and hunger caused me to start hallucinating. I even suspected Kian, thinking he was one of those fakes too. I nearly swung my walking stick to attack him, but then realized he was just delirious from dehydration. We kept dragging ourselves along, everything blurred in exhaustion. The fifth time I fell, I thought about lying down and waiting to die, but the excited yelp of an animal behind me made me spring up and keep going. As we neared the trail sign, I counted the people: Keon, Oliver, Gila, Amy. I suddenly realized something was wrong. Gila wasn't sweating or tired like the others. She looked like Leora, but with lighter brown hair. She said she was my girlfriend, and a flood of memories about a relationship with Hela rushed into my head. But I knew it was false. I attacked her with my walking stick. The stick hit her face. Her jaw shattered and her temple collapsed. She still tried to say, "I love you," through her broken teeth. I kept hitting her until the stick broke in two. After that, I saw a skinny animal drag Gila's body into the woods. It looked skeletal and frantic, with hunger. A feeling of pity briefly washed over me, but I wasn't sure if it was caused by it. We finally reached Route 15. Someone spotted us and put us into an ambulance. Doctors explained that the combination of extreme heat, hunger, and dehydration had caused visual and auditory hallucinations. I was hospitalized for a week. Keon and Leora refused to talk about what happened. Oliver and Amy were the same. They just wanted to forget everything. But I can't forget. I still clearly remember Neva, Rian, Lise, and the fake Leora. I wrote everything down to release the obsession. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing. I've been a child therapist for 15 years now. Every day, I sit across from kids and remind them about the consequences of reckless games. I tell them that one careless second can change everything, but I never tell them why I know that. The summer I was 8 years old, my family lived in a small wooden house on the outskirts of town. My mom was busy with her tomato patch in the backyard. My 6-year-old sister, Nemi, and I were inseparable all day. She followed me like a shadow and treated me like the standard for everything. Every week, we watched WWE on TV. Nemi loved the wrestler The Undertaker the most. She imitated every single move perfectly. I would laugh and usually say the whole thing was silly. That afternoon, Mom was out in the garden. Nemi and I were sprawled out on the living room floor. Nemi said she wanted to play with me. "You be the Undertaker, Lyra. I want to get knocked down." Usually we'd switch roles, and I'd be the one getting knocked down. But Nemi's suggestion that day actually sounded fun to me. We sneaked up to our bedroom to play, so Mom wouldn't know. If she knew, she definitely wouldn't let us play wrestling. I grabbed Nemi's collar and lifted her high. Nemi was light. I raised her easily. She giggled, her feet kicking wildly in the air. But as I went to set her down, I lost my grip. Nemi fell very fast, and I couldn't catch her in time. A pretty loud crack sound came as Nemi's head hit the floor. Nemi lay still. Blood started to leak out from under her hair. My heart felt like it stopped beating. I called Nemi's name in a shaky voice. Nemi groaned, her arms and legs twitching weakly. Her eyes opened, but her pupils were dilated, looking right through me. Panic swallowed the reasoning of an 8-year-old. I was afraid Mom would yell. I couldn't think clearly. I just wanted everything to disappear, to go back to before the accident happened. I pulled Nemi. She felt terribly heavier than usual, and I had to use all my strength to move her. I opened the closet door. I pushed Nemi inside. Nemi squirmed, kicking the closet door from the inside. Her cry was weak and choked, like she was trying to call me. But I still shut the door, pressing it tight until the latch clicked Snack. I sat on the bed, just staring at the closet door. My whole body was numb. I saw the door shake slightly with every kick from the inside. Then came the scratching at the door, and then the heavy breathing. I turned the radio up as loud as I could. The loud music drowned out all other sounds. I just sat there, unmoving, unthinking, no feelings left. Only my empty eyes stared at the closet door, glanced at the wall clock, and looked back at the closet door. I counted every second. Finally, everything went silent. I don't know how long passed, but Mom's voice came from downstairs. Her voice sounded worried. She called again, her tone more strained. "Lyra, Nemi, where are you?" I heard Mom's footsteps running around the house searching. Her calls grew more panicked when we didn't answer. Then the heavy, hurried footsteps came up the stairs. I was still sitting there looking at the closet door, not moving. The bedroom door opened. Mom walked in, her face flushed with worry. She stopped when she saw me sitting on the bed, staring at the closet. Her eyes shifted down to the floor, where a trail of dark red blood stretched from the middle of the room to the closet door. "Lyra, what's wrong? Where is Nemi?" Mom's voice trembled. I didn't answer. My lips moved, but no sound came out. I just kept looking at the closet door. Mom rushed to the closet, her hands shaking as she pulled the door open. Nemi was curled up inside, the blood now dry and stiff in her hair. Her head was tilted unnaturally, like her neck was broken. Mom screamed, pulled Nemi out, and hugged her tight. Then came the police, the ambulance, and a lot of questions. I sat on the sofa, clutching my teddy bear, my eyes fixed on the floor. They said it was a tragic accident, and I was just an 8-year-old in a panic who didn't know what to do. Adult justice was gentle with me, but I knew the truth. Deep down, under the guise of a child, I knew what I did. I heard Nemi crying and pleading, the sound of her hands slamming against the wood panel, but I didn't open the door. I left her alone in the suffocating darkness, with the wound on her head still bleeding, and I locked that door myself. I was sent to a juvenile facility afterward. They said it was an accident, so I wasn't held for long, but I still don't feel innocent. Now I spend my life helping other children stay safe, to make sure no child has to go through what Nemi went through. Every night, I hear the closet door shaking and rattling in the dark. I open my eyes. The corner of the room is pitch black, and a small figure, its head tilted to one side, appears. The figure moves closer, and I see the dried blood on her nightgown as dark stains. Her eyes stare straight at me, never blinking. "Lyra, let me out. I'm scared of the dark. I can't move." Tears stream down my face. I just lie there, watching Nemi walk closer to my bed, step by step, slowly, with wet, bloody footprints on the floor. "I'm sorry, Nemi. I've thrown out all the closets in my room, but the sound still finds me. The worst part is that sometimes the rattling stops, and I hear the closet door gently creak open, and the room turns cold, letting me know that Nemi is still there, waiting for me to open the door." I used to work as an assistant director for a cable television network in California. We specialized in producing shows that explored paranormal phenomena. The job had a good salary, flexible hours, and sometimes I even met a few celebrities. I thought I would stick with this career for a long time. That summer, we were assigned to film a special episode at an abandoned mental hospital outside the city. Our guest was a rising pop singer. I'll call her Madison to protect her image. Honestly, Madison's gentle image wasn't a good fit for these kinds of shows, but her management company wanted her to appear on our program to create a new, edgier impression. Madison was very popular at the time. I remember the planning meeting where our executive producer said this was a golden opportunity, and we had to be absolutely meticulous. The filming day was near the end of August. It was unusually hot, even as it got close to evening. Our entire crew had 8 people: the director, the cameraman, lighting, sound, me, and 3 other production assistants. Madison arrived 2 hours late, accompanied by her personal assistant and makeup artist. She smiled, waved to everyone, and apologized for the delay. We started filming on the 3rd floor, which used to be the isolation treatment area. The hallway was long, lined with small rooms that had rusted iron doors. The smell of mold and dampness was overwhelming. Madison acted quite well. The initial script had her screaming when she heard a noise and clutching the male host's arm. Everything went normally until we entered room 17. The walls were peeling, the concrete floor was cracked, and a rusty iron bed frame sat in the corner. The air inside felt heavy and suffocating. I wasn't the only one who felt it. I noticed the cameraman looked uncomfortable, constantly shifting how he held the camera. The director cued us to start filming. Madison walked into the middle of the room as instructed. According to the script, she was supposed to read a few lines about how she felt, but Madison just stood still. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. The director asked if she was okay. She didn't answer. Then, her head began to tilt to the right, slowly, like a puppet whose strings were being pulled. Next, her eyes opened unusually wide, and both pupils rolled back until only the whites were showing. Each eye was looking in a completely different direction. Her face started to distort. One cheek drooped down while the other side scrunched up, making her face look twisted. I had never seen a human face contort like that before. "Madison?" her assistant screamed. But the person standing in the middle of the room wasn't Madison anymore. A guttural roar erupted. It sounded like an elderly man being choked. Then, she charged toward us with terrifying speed. One sound guy who was standing closest couldn't get out of the way fast enough. She grabbed his shirt tightly. Madison bit hard into his arm. I swear I heard a cracking sound. The sound guy screamed in agony. Her assistant and another production assistant rushed in to pull Madison away, but she was unbelievably strong. Madison flung her assistant, who fell hard into a corner. The other PA tried to hold her back and was bitten on the shoulder. With a tearing sound, most of the young man's ear was ripped, left dangling and bleeding non-stop. Everyone was screaming. The director yelled for an ambulance. The cameraman was still filming. I don't know if it was professional instinct or if he was too shocked to move. I stood frozen, my feet feeling glued to the ground. Then, the heavy smell of waste filled the air. Madison, with her face still distorted and still growling, had urine streaming down her legs. Everyone was horrified. A few seconds later, another foul smell appeared. She had also defecated. None of us dared to get close. We didn't even dare to move, afraid she would go completely insane again. After a few minutes, Madison suddenly collapsed. Her body went limp, like all her bones had been removed. We waited a few more minutes before daring to approach. By then, Madison was awake. She looked at the scene around her, then at herself, but showed absolutely no expression. Then she asked in a normal voice, "Have we started filming yet?" The ambulance arrived and took the 2 bitten crew members to the hospital. Madison was taken away by her management company. There were no police and no official investigation. Everything was handled discreetly because a celebrity was involved. The next day, I received a call from the network executives. The man's voice on the other end was cold. The show was completely canceled. All the footage had to be destroyed. No one was allowed to mention this incident in any form. A non-disclosure agreement, NDA, would be sent to everyone. That same afternoon, we signed the NDA. We didn't ask any questions. Anyone in this industry is used to keeping secrets. About a week later, we heard news that the sound guy, the first person she bit, had been in a car accident. He was driving on the highway and suddenly swerved straight into the median barrier. He survived, but had 3 broken ribs and a concussion. He told the police that he saw a woman with a distorted face sitting in the back seat through his rearview mirror. A few months after that, the production assistant whose ear was bitten was found collapsed in his apartment. His neighbors said they heard terrible screaming and quickly called the police. When they broke down the door, he was seizing on the floor, foaming at the mouth, with his eyes rolled back. He was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. I heard he couldn't speak anymore. He just made growling noises. As for me, after the incident, I struggled to sleep. I often dreamed of Madison's distorted image. I started being afraid of the dark. My mind constantly imagined ghosts and demons. I requested a transfer to another department, taking a simple administrative job. One time I ran into Madison's personal assistant at a coffee shop. She was much thinner, with dark circles under her eyes. "You don't look well?" I asked. Madison's assistant nodded slightly. She was taking a lot of medication. Even before we filmed that episode, she was under so much pressure and had a brutal schedule from the company. They kept piling on rules, contracts, and clauses. The pills helped her keep it together for a while, until they weren't enough anymore. I knew the she the assistant was talking about was Madison. I didn't say anything, choosing to listen silently. But what happened in that room was the result of having to hold on for too long. She really just broke. At this point, the assistant broke down crying. I sat with her until she calmed down and didn't ask anything else. Madison stopped appearing publicly. Her career was virtually frozen after the incident. There were rumors she was in treatment at a private psychiatric facility on the East Coast. Some people said she had left the entertainment industry for good. I worked until the end of that month and then quit my job. I'm no longer sure if what we witnessed that day was a paranormal phenomenon or just the result of a mind pushed to its absolute limit. But I know that since that day, I no longer look at the entertainment industry or people in the same way. My name is Michael Collins, and I live in Tampa, Florida. I hate Florida summers. The humid heat feels like a wet blanket wrapped around your body, making my apartment feel like an oven, even with the AC blasting at full power. That night, the night everything ended, was no different. I walked into the apartment after my shift at the Clearwater Casino. The faint smell of whiskey lingered in the air. Rebecca, the woman I'd lived with for 2 years, a nurse at Tampa General Hospital, had already started drinking before I got home. Our relationship wasn't love. It was a disaster waiting to happen. Both of us carried wounds from our pasts. I had my uncontrollable anger and the bottle of whiskey that never left my bedside. She had bruises left behind by old relationships and a deep, gnawing fear of being abandoned. 2 broken people trying to form something whole, only to hurt each other more. 2 weeks earlier, drunk and angry, I shoved Rebecca into the wall. The impact knocked over the table lamp, shattering it. A piece of glass cut her arm, leaving a long scar. I apologized 1,000 times, swore it would never happen again. But Rebecca's eyes had already turned cold. Everything between us was dying. That evening, we sat on the couch drinking and watching some mindless TV show. My head was foggy from alcohol and exhaustion. My phone vibrated. It was Jack, my last real friend. I stepped out onto the balcony to answer. His voice was tense. He told me he'd seen Rebecca at a bar the night before. She had been extremely drunk and had hinted at threats, revenge, and some disturbing plans. Jack warned me to leave the apartment immediately, but I ignored him. I went back inside. Rebecca was sitting there with a strange smile on her lips. A large black suitcase was sitting in the middle of the floor. Rebecca introduced a game, a challenge. I was supposed to climb into the suitcase and see how long I could last before begging to be let out. In my drunken haze, it sounded like a weird, harmless dare. Why not? We'd done crazier things before. I remember the feeling of climbing inside that suitcase. At first, there was a childish thrill, like hiding in a secret cave. It was big enough for me to curl up in, knees pulled tight to my chest. Rebecca leaned over me, smiling softly. When I heard the zipper closing, I was still laughing. Darkness swallowed me, with only a sliver of light slipping through the seam. The cramped, humid space quickly filled with my own hot breath, sweat dripping down my back. The first few minutes passed quietly. I heard Rebecca moving around. She was getting more ice for her drink. I asked when she would let me out. No answer. I assumed she was messing with me. But after a few more minutes, I started feeling genuinely uneasy. The air felt thick, suffocating. The heat pressed in on me. Nausea rose in my throat. I told her to open it. Still no answer. Instead, I heard a quiet laugh and the click of a phone camera. Around minute 9 or 10, real fear seeped in. The suitcase suddenly felt less like a hiding spot and more like a coffin. Every breath felt harder. The air was disappearing. I began begging. That's when Rebecca finally spoke, her voice cold and distant. She said this was the lesson I deserved for everything I'd done to her. The bruises, the insults, the broken lamp, the late-night ER trip. I finally understood. This wasn't a game. I pounded on the walls of the suitcase, kicked, threw my weight at it, anything to break out. But the thick fabric held, and being curled in a helpless position meant I had no leverage. The noise I made wasn't loud enough, and our apartment was always noisy from our fights. No neighbor would find anything unusual. 20 minutes later, my body started to seize. Panic made my breathing faster, burning through what little oxygen I had left. My fingers went numb. My head spun. I didn't have the strength to pound anymore. I heard Rebecca turn on the TV, loud enough to drown out the faint sounds I was still making. She even talked to someone on the phone, her voice calm, casual, like nothing was happening. Time became distorted. My brain tried to recall how long a person could survive with no air. 3 minutes? 5? I heard Rebecca moving around the apartment, then silence. Did she go to bed? While I was suffocating a few feet away? My last breath was a soft exhale. Death wasn't as terrifying as I thought. It felt like slipping into sleep after an unbearably long day. The only difference was that I would never wake up again. Death wasn't the end of my story. No, only the middle chapter. I watched Rebecca the next morning as she woke up. Her eyes widened as she remembered. She walked toward the suitcase with hesitant steps and unzipped it with trembling hands. Her scream caught in her throat when she saw my twisted, blue, rigid body. After her panic subsided, a strange calm washed over her. Rebecca started planning, wiping fingerprints, deleting messages, preparing a story about a drunk hide-and-seek game gone wrong. She dialed 911 with a shaking, tearful voice. Detective Daniels was the first to question her version. He noticed the bruises on my body, but fate stepped in. Rebecca's phone. She had forgotten to delete the videos and photos she took of me inside the suitcase. The undeniable proof of an intentional killing. The trial began 6 months later. Rebecca wore a Navy suit, keeping up the facade of a tragic accident. But when the evidence was shown, her composure shattered. On the final day, Rebecca confessed. Not out of guilt, but as a legal strategy. She talked about our violent, toxic history, the wounds I had caused her. She claimed she just lost control. The jury didn't buy it. Rebecca Sloan was sentenced to 25 years in prison for second-degree murder. Looking back on my life, I see all the terrible choices that led me into that suitcase. The drinking, the rage, the violence, the toxic relationship I didn't have the courage to leave. I wasn't an innocent victim. I died in a suitcase, a coffin I chose long before I climbed into it. And the worst part is, a small part of me still wonders, would she have opened it if I begged harder? This story was inspired by a real case. In the Sarah Boone and Jorge Torres case, Jorge Torres was found dead inside a suitcase in Orange County, Florida. His girlfriend, Sarah Boone, 45, was taken into questioning. At first, Sarah couldn't explain Jorge's injuries, but later admitted their relationship involved mutual violence, including Jorge hitting her weeks earlier. A video found on Sarah's phone showed her next to the suitcase, while Jorge said he couldn't breathe. Sarah responded coldly and laughed. She claimed it was a drunken hide-and-seek game and that she fell asleep while he was inside. She faces second-degree murder charges and could receive up to 16 years in prison if convicted.
My name is Andrew. I was born and raised in Los Angeles. My father was a police detective, a serious, quiet man with sharp, cold eyes. Growing up, the person I loved and felt closest to wasn't my father. It was my Uncle Caleb. To my young eyes, Uncle Caleb was the coolest guy in the world. He was my father's younger brother, but he was the total opposite of a stern detective. He ran a surf shop at Santa Monica Beach. He had shoulder-length hair, always wore sunglasses, and laughed loudly like life was just one big game. He lived in a small blue house by the ocean with his girlfriend, Lena. She was tall, tan, and had hair as red as fire. Every summer, my family would drive down to hang out with them. Uncle Caleb taught me to surf, while Lena built sandcastles with me and my little brother. Those were the happiest days of my childhood. One summer, when I was 7, everything changed. We were all packed and ready to go to Uncle Caleb's. I was so excited about my new swimsuit and the fact that I'd grown a few inches. Suddenly, my dad announced that Uncle Caleb was busy and the trip was canceled. I was heartbroken and cried for hours. Dad comforted me by promising we would go the following week. But that trip never happened. I remember my parents acting very strange after that. They whispered to each other with serious faces. My mom cried a lot at night. I could hear her sobbing from their bedroom. My father became even colder and more distant. The next day, my parents sat my brother and me down. Dad told us Uncle Caleb had died in a car accident. Mom added that he had gone to heaven. I just sat there in silence. I was only 7, too young to really understand death, but I knew one thing for sure. He was never coming back. There would be no more summers at the blue house by the beach. I cried a lot. But eventually, a huge void opened up in my life, and I didn't know what to do with it. As time passed, the wound was buried. I grew up, went to college, got a job, and fell in love. But in the dusty corners of my memory, Uncle Caleb was always there. A piece of my childhood that had been snapped off and never mended. When I was 27, living with my girlfriend Emily in Oxnard, we happened to be driving down the Pacific Coast Highway, PCH, towards Santa Monica to visit my parents. As we passed a steep cliffside, Emily pointed out the window. "I just remembered something," she said softly. "About 20 years ago, a friend of my mom's went on vacation with her boyfriend to a cabin somewhere near here, and they vanished. A few days later, the police found the boyfriend's car at the bottom of a cliff. I kept driving and listening, not realizing where this was going yet. The boyfriend died inside from a broken neck.
But Lena, they found her in the trunk. Her body had been dismembered and wrapped in bags. When I heard the name Lena, I slammed on the brakes. Emily gasped and grabbed my arm. "What's wrong with you?" "What was the boyfriend's name?" My voice was trembling. "I think it was Caleb!" I couldn't say another word, even though Emily kept asking what was wrong. My mind went blank, and my heart was pounding out of my chest. I called my father that night. He wouldn't explain over the phone and told me to come over the next day. When I arrived, my mother was in tears. She apologized for hiding the truth for so long to protect me. "You were so small," she sobbed. "We didn't know how to tell you." My father sat down next to me. He told me that on that fateful day, Uncle Caleb had called him from the road. "Your uncle was delirious," Dad said. "He was screaming nonsense." My father was actually the one assigned to investigate the case back then. He was at the scene. He was the one who saw Lena's body in the trunk, and he saw his own brother dead in the driver's seat with a broken neck and a bloody face. As he told me the story, my father mentioned details that confused the entire investigative team. Nobody could understand what actually happened. That weekend, even though the camping area was usually packed, every single cabin surrounding the one where Caleb and Lena stayed was empty. There were no witnesses. No one heard a scream, and no one saw anything unusual. Just a few hours before that delirious phone call, a gas station attendant saw them acting completely normal. Caleb pumped gas while Lena bought a soda. They were laughing and kissing before getting back in the car. The attendant said they looked very happy. But in the 20 minutes that followed, Uncle Caleb murdered Lena, dismembered her, put her in the trunk, and then intentionally drove off a cliff without his seatbelt on. Caleb didn't do drugs, he didn't drink, and he had no history of mental illness. The toxicology report showed nothing in his system, my father said. He went silent for a long time, then looked me straight in the eyes. For the first time in my life, I saw my father cry. "Son, I've been a cop for over 30 years. I've investigated and analyzed so many criminals. But I will never, ever understand why my kind, gentle brother went insane and committed such a horrific crime. 20 years have passed, but that question still has no answer. What happened in those 20 short minutes? What did Uncle Caleb see or hear? What could turn a man that gentle into a brutal killer? My family will never know, and that will always be a dull, aching pain that never goes away."
They say everything is bigger in Texas, and that includes the mistakes. I've been a bartender at a riverfront restaurant in Orange since 2011, and I will never forget the summer of 2015, or the customer named Tommy. My name is Gavin. I'm 38 years old. I started working for a man named Al back in 2011. Al had owned his place on the water since the 1960s. The restaurant wasn't fancy, but it had a real charm. Every summer, the place was packed. People came for the burgers, the cold beer, and the river breeze. When the Texas heat got too intense, people would jump straight off the private dock into the water to cool off. It was practically a local tradition. That all changed one day in June of that year. I was behind the bar when I noticed Al standing perfectly still, staring out at the dock. His face was tense, and his eyes were locked on the surface of the river. Before I could ask what was wrong, Al suddenly barked, "Nobody gets in the water anymore!" The whole bar went silent for a few seconds. Immediately after, Al grabbed a marker and some paper. He wrote, "No swimming" in huge letters. He taped the signs everywhere, especially near the dock, but he didn't give anyone an explanation. The very next day, those flimsy paper signs were replaced. Al put up a large wooden sign with bright red letters, bolted to a post right at the water's edge. From that point on, swimming was strictly forbidden. The customers started complaining. Many people were annoyed and frustrated because they came there specifically to swim, but Al just kept his mouth shut. Then, around July, Tommy showed up. Tommy was about 28 years old and a regular at the bar. He was a big guy, very confident, and a bit of a hothead, though he wasn't usually a troublemaker. That night, Tommy came in with his girlfriend, Victoria. They played pool and ordered a few drinks like they always did. Close to midnight, as I was wiping down glasses behind the bar, I overheard Tommy say, "I'm jumping in that river tonight." I warned him immediately. "Tommy, you know the rules. No one is allowed in the water. Al banned it." He looked at me with a cocky smirk. "I don't care about that old man's rules," he said. With that, Tommy stood up, grabbed Victoria's hand, and walked out the door. I felt an uneasy pit in my stomach, but the bar was still busy, so I couldn't leave my post right away. About 10 minutes later, a blood-curdling scream echoed from the dock. I grabbed the flashlight and sprinted outside. When I reached the water, I froze. Victoria was standing at the very edge of the dock, soaking wet. She was shaking violently, gasping for air, her face completely white. When she saw me, she tried to speak, but couldn't get the words out. She just kept pointing frantically at the middle of the river. "Tommy, it dragged him under." I didn't ask questions. I swept my flashlight across the water. The beam cut through the ripples, and then I saw it clearly. The water was stained a dark, murky red. Under the light, Tommy's body surfaced face down. His back was arched above the water, perfectly still. But the most horrific part happened a split second later. Just as the light hit Tommy's back, the water underneath him surged upward. Something massive and dark gray rose to the surface at incredible speed. In the blink of an eye, a pair of huge jaws clamped onto Tommy's lower half and yanked him down with terrifying force. His body vanished right before my eyes, as if he had been swallowed by the river itself. The water thrashed wildly, leaving behind spreading red clouds and small pieces of debris floating on the surface. Victoria screamed and collapsed, fainting on the spot. I could only stand there, staring at the water. I knew exactly what those floating pieces were, and I knew exactly which part of a human body they had come from. After the attack, the police and wildlife officials moved in. That was when the truth finally came out. On the day Al had banned swimming, he had seen a massive alligator under the dock with his own eyes. The beast was over 11 feet long and weighed at least 400 pounds. It moved through the water like a silent shadow. Al knew exactly how dangerous it was, but instead of telling the public, he chose to stay quiet. He was terrified that he would lose all his business if the news got out. That's why he only put up the no swimming signs. Everyone knew there were gators in the area, but they were usually small and shy. No one really worried about them. Over time, this one had grown into a monster without anyone noticing. According to the records, Tommy was the first person killed by an alligator in Texas in nearly 200 years. To most people, it was just a shocking news story that faded after a few weeks. But for me, it is a haunting memory that I can never erase. I quit working at Al's place and moved to a local bar far from the river. Now, any large body of water makes me shake and lose focus. This story is inspired by a real-life tragedy. Since the 1960s, A man named Al had a riverfront spot in Orange, Texas, where swimming was common. In June 2015, he spotted a massive predator and banned swimming. On July 3rd, 28-year-old Tommy Woodward ignored the warnings and jumped in despite his girlfriend's fears. He was attacked and dragged under by an 11-foot gator. He became the first fatal victim of an alligator attack in Texas in almost 2 centuries.
This happened during the summer when I was 24 years old. Back then, Betty and I were still together. We traveled to Santa Fe, New Mexico to celebrate our anniversary. We didn't know that trip would be the beginning of the end for us. On the day it happened, we were walking around the Santa Fe Plaza in the historic Old Town. The area was packed with tourists, souvenir shops, and restaurants lined up side by side. After a while, Betty said her stomach was hurting and asked me to go buy some antacids. She told me she would wait right in front of the public restrooms nearby. I headed off, thinking I'd only be gone for a few minutes. But since I didn't know my way around the tourist district, it took me nearly 30 minutes to find a store and get back. When I returned to the spot, Betty was gone. At first, I wasn't too worried. I figured she might have stepped inside the restroom or was just browsing a shop close by. I waited for a few minutes and then called her. The phone rang, but nobody picked up. I called 4 more times with the same result, and that's when the panic started to set in. I walked circles around the plaza, checking every bench, every craft stall, and all the small side streets leading off the square. I kept calling her over and over, but Betty never answered and was nowhere to be found. I was officially terrified. Betty wasn't the type of person to just wander off without saying anything. Even if she were mad at me, she would have at least sent a text. Then, my phone vibrated. It was a very long iMessage from Betty's number. The content left me speechless. She said she was fed up with our relationship and wanted to end things immediately. She told me not to look for her because she had already taken a taxi and left the city. I was shocked, angry, and confused all at once. I couldn't understand how someone who just asked me to buy them medicine could suddenly break up with me in such an abrupt and nonsensical way. I tried calling her back, but the phone was turned off. I texted her asking for an explanation, but there was no reply. Frustrated and hurt, I wandered around the old town looking for a bar to clear my head. That's when I saw something strange in a secluded corner. 2 middle-aged women were dragging a young girl along the sidewalk. The girl looked completely out of it. Her eyes were glazed over, and her limbs were limp as if she had no strength left. To a stranger, it looked like 2 friends helping someone who had too much to drink, but my gut told me something was wrong because of how forced it looked. I stepped forward and asked if they needed help. Immediately, the 2 women jumped, let go of the girl, and muttered something about their friend being too drunk before disappearing into the crowd. Once the girl caught her breath, she told me a horrifying story. She had just stepped out of a restroom when 2 strange women approached her, pretended to be her friends, and started dragging her away. When she tried to cry out for help, they told bystanders she was just drunk. People just watched with pity or annoyance, and no one stepped in to help. Hearing that sent a chill down my spine. I immediately thought of Betty. The coincidence was too terrifying to ignore. I ran straight to a nearby police station to file a report, but the officers were incredibly dismissive. They looked at the breakup text on my phone and shrugged it off as relationship drama, saying she had clearly stated she was leaving. They told me to go back to my hotel and wait. I left the station feeling helpless and searched the plaza for Betty one last time. Finally, exhausted and hopeless, I went back to the hotel. When I opened the door, I was stunned to see Betty there. She was sitting on the floor in a state of total shock. She was covered in scratches and dirt, and her face was deathly pale. After I calmed her down, she finally told me about the kidnapping drama she had just survived in broad daylight. While she was waiting for me, two strange women dressed like tourists approached her. They suddenly grabbed her by the hair and started screaming at her. They yelled to the surrounding crowd that Betty was a professional scammer who had just stolen a large sum of money from them. Their aggression and the details of their lies were so convincing that the people passing by believed them. Bystanders looked at Betty with judgment. Some even whispered in agreement with the victims instead of helping her. Just like that, in the middle of a crowded square, Betty was abducted. They took her down into a basement room that Betty described as looking like a private lounge or a karaoke room. There were two other girls already trapped in there. A short time later, a man walked in. According to Betty, everything he said made it clear that the three of them were part of a human trafficking deal. He said he was waiting for the other side to inspect the merchandise, but he seemed angry because there was some kind of complication. In the end, the deal fell through. After a tense standoff, the kidnappers decided to let all three girls go. Before they left, the men made a very clear threat. If anyone went to the police, the consequences would be fatal because they knew how to find them. It was obvious then. The breakup text I received had been sent by the kidnappers. I immediately insisted on going back to the police to show them the location of the basement and take down the gang, but Betty was so traumatized by the threats that she flatly refused. She just wanted to leave Santa Fe immediately and never look back. We had the biggest fight of our lives over this. I felt that staying silent was helping criminals, but she felt I wasn't being sensitive to her safety or the safety of our families. In the end, we drove back to Los Angeles without reporting it. But what happened in Santa Fe didn't stay there. It lingered between us. Betty became more and more withdrawn. I couldn't get over my feelings of helplessness and anger. Eventually, after many more arguments, we broke up. That story is a painful lesson I will never forget. To this day, whenever I travel, I never let my loved ones stand alone for too long.